Cuba, I'm going to be happier. We're going to be happier. Because you know what? The world outside might be bleak. People might be super, super brainwashed and supporting the bad guys. Every way you look at it. But, there's some good things happening. There's some good things happening in the world, and we're going to talk about some of it today in Cuba. So today is, what is this, day 7? I think it's day 7, maybe, of our series on Cuba. And today, it's day 6, maybe, we're going to be talking about their education system. And this is really something very, very cool. I always knew that Cuba had a good education system. This is something you hear about, right? Have you guys heard about this? Did you guys grow up hearing this? I always heard this. Their education system was so great. And I was very, very fortunate when I went to Cuba to get to meet several people who were involved with their education system. The literacy campaigns that they had waged right after the revolution to teach everybody how to read in the country, the children in elementary schools, and some college students as well. So that's what we're going to talk about. So Cuba is consistently thought of as having one of the best education systems in the world. And I've got some resources I'm going to share with you guys about this information right now. So this is a paper by Brian Johnstone called Cuba's Education System, a Beacon of Light in Latin America Facing an Uncertain Future. This is from 2008, and I can say probably their education system has improved since then, if I had to guess. So I have some notes here. Something you need to know is that the United States and its constant pursuit of discrediting Cuba, destabilizing Cuba, and ruining Cuba, and turning Cuba into a dictatorship that promotes capital once again, like it was under Batista. Part of this is also them attacking the Cuban educational system in a massive way. So we actually have a block quote here in this paper from Lavinia Gasparini, who's a World Bank specialist in Latin America, the Caribbean, and African education systems. And you guys know the World Bank, very neoliberal institution, very anti-socialist institution. This is, not an institution that's inclined to support communism. And this is why also when we say, hey, China lifted 800 million people out of poverty, and liberals and conservatives want to cry about it and say that's not true, that's propaganda, we can say the World Bank even had to acknowledge it was true. The World Bank, who hates communism. So if they even are like, yeah, China lifted 800 million people out of poverty, China lifted 800 million people out of poverty. And so this is kind of a similar situation here. So this quote here says, the record of Cuban education is outstanding. Universal school enrollment and attendance, nearly universal adult literacy, proportional female representation at all levels, including higher education, strong scientific training base, particularly in chemistry and medicine. As we saw yesterday, medicine is a huge focus for them on the island. Consistent pedagogical quality across widely dispersed classrooms. I have not heard the word pedagogy so much since college as I did in Cuba. The average person is talking about pedagogy all the time. Equality of basic educational opportunity, even in impoverished areas, both rural and urban. And this paper says a lot of people want to tell you, okay, well, these figures are biased. You can't trust it. It's coming from the Cuban government. But this person's like, no, we have World Bank data talking about this. We also have UNESCO data talking about this, which the UN, not particularly friendly towards socialists, as we know, right? So, we have a lot of different places talking about this, and this paper does get into some details. So, I'm not going to read the whole paper. It is long, but I'm going to get you guys a tiny URL right now so you can read it later if you would like. And we're just going to kind of look at some of the parts that are most relevant for what we're talking about here today. I think this is correct. Yes, I think this is it. What we're looking at today. So, she kind of talks about this here, and she says, several studies have been conducted comparing Cuba's education system with other socialist countries, other high-performing developing countries, and other countries that are enduring long-term economic sanctions. This analysis is conducted specifically in a regional context, comparing education systems in Latin America and the Caribbean. Additionally, two authors have noted that statistics about Cuba, particularly data that can be used to promote Cuba's government, are often considered politically influenced and unreliable by social scientists, their extensive quantitative analysis demonstrated, however, that most of UNESCO statistics about Cuba are reliable and solid and valid. Thus, only published UNESCO statistics are used for this person's analysis. So they're basically like, look, you might have some capitalists coming in saying, no, it's bad because of ideological reasons. You might have some socialists coming in saying, no, it's perfect because of ideological reasons. So this person's like, I'm the enlightened centrist. But they're like, let's just fucking use UNESCO data then. And it turns out that even if you just use UNESCO data, you're going to end up with proof that the Cuban healthcare system, education system, that's the one, is extremely impressive and doing great. So we have a little diagram here. And under it says, in UNICEF's 2004 report, The State of the World's Children from 2005, Cuba is praised for choosing to substantially cut defense spending during a period of financial crisis in the 1990s while demonstrating an unwavering commitment to children's rights by preserving education expenditures. Now, look at the state that Cuba is unfortunately in today, right? We know that this is a hard decision to make for any country. Cutting their defense spending makes them open for more imperialist aggression. Now, we're seeing kind of the effects of not prioritizing defense in a massive way in Cuba. And when we look comparatively at places like the DPRK, North Korea, that has prioritized defense spending, it's hard to say what the better move is to protect your children. I would argue that prioritizing defense spending when the United States government and its allies are trying to wipe you off the face of the earth is the better move to protect your children, right? That is what I would think, because your children cannot learn anything if they are not alive. And we know, what does it look like when the United States government goes to war in a country over ideological reasons? Well, we saw what happened in the DPRK. They killed 20 to 25% of their entire population, including 10% of their entire civilian population, including children. They destroyed 80% of the infrastructure of the DPRK. They don't have schools in a situation like that. You can't learn anything. So I just want to say, when places like UNICEF are pressuring countries or praising countries for cutting defense spending and investing in education, you know, that is a very biased praise, and nobody can unilaterally decide what the right move in that situation is, right? I'm inclined to believe national security comes first, because your people can't learn anything if they've been killed by American bombs and guns, right? But, you know, just that's in. They're in the book. Larry says, yeah, it guaranteed food security in the long term despite the hardships as well. Yeah. I should do a Google Doc on Cuba. That's a great idea. Bye, Ghost in this Hell. Thanks for hanging out just for my sad ranting. By any means necessary says, reminder, defense spending in the West is just a measurement of graft, not power. Look at the U.S. fighter jet did against Iranian drones. That's so true, too. And we have such inflated defense spending. I mean, like, we're the masters of what? Didn't we spend, like, thousands of dollars on a toilet seat once for the U.S. military? Or, like, hundreds of dollars for, like, a nut or a bolt that should have cost, like, 50 cents? Like, we are the masters of overspending on defense. So our military looks a lot stronger than it does by sheer dollars, because we have all of these buddy deals with weapons contractors, and they do just charge the government hundreds and thousands of dollars for things that should only cost a few cents or dollars. And there's no oversight, really. The Pentagon has failed like every audit it's ever had. They're just like, we don't know. We don't have records of it. I don't know. Whatever. And because there's no accountability, it can look on paper like we are spending so much money on the military. We don't even know what that's buying us, though. Right? We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, I think millions of dollars, on helicopters, and it once turned out that they didn't even work. They didn't even, like, fly. Yeah, Raytheon's making one hell of a toilet seat, Manapua says. Laser-guided toilet seat. Maximum toilet seat technology for your butt. So, you know, very interesting. But still, I just wanted to point that out. You know, that sentence I take issue with because it's a little more complicated than that. But Cuba still, despite this, they say, contributes a significantly higher percentage of its gross national product to education than any other country selected for comparison. In fact, of the data available in UNESCO's report, only 5 countries exceeded Cuba in total public expenditure on education as a percent of GNP. So they span the 6th highest amount of their gross national product on education out of any country in the world, despite being an impoverished country with limited access to resources, dealing with this massive blockade. And I think that is impressive, no matter how you look at it, right? Communism is toilet. You guys are killing me. Heated bidets. You know what? I have a heated bidet in my house. I'm going to say, did not cost even $1,000, let alone many thousands of dollars. Well worth the purchase. Well worth. Wet toilet. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm just going to say, if you're considering investing in a heated bidet, I think it's worth the investment. I can personally say my butt is never cold. My butt is never cold. And I live in LA. If it's doing amazing things for my butt warmth in LA, think about what it could do for your butt warmth in a place where it snows. That's all I'm saying. That is all I'm saying. Okay? Life-changing. Life-changing. So, I am rich. Yeah. Soak it in, chat. This is what wealth looks like. Never having a cold butt again. I know. So this report basically, I just pulled this up because I wanted you guys to see that education is something that Cuba prioritizes quite a bit. They definitely prioritize education. And you're going to see that in how we talk about education going forward. Now, the United States has been trying to discredit the Cuban education system for decades because of its success. And you'll see all sorts of stories pop up in the news like this. Cuban schools, too good to be true? What explains claims of Castro's educational excellence? Almost certainly cheating on the tests. It's not that they're investing a lot in education, as we just saw. It's not that they have the 6th highest investment in education on the planet. They must be cheating. They've got to be cheating on the tests. And this is really what they go on to talk about in articles like this. They go on to talk shit about this thing called the literacy campaign, which we're going to talk all about in a few minutes. They're talking about, this is not actually good performance. There's an achievement gap, blah, 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 blah. This guy, Paul Peterson, this fucking schmuck. Let's see if we can see his face bigger. This fucking loser. This fucking guy, Paul Peterson, if you're out there, it's on site. I will fight you. Physically fight you in a parking lot to defend the Cuban educational system. I will fight you over it. Bring a weapon. Bring a weapon. I don't need a weapon. It's for you. It's for you. That's how mad I am at this man. So I'm just going to put that out there. All my comrades hate this guy. Like, what are you fucking doing out here talking shit on little kids in a country that it's impoverished, that's just managing to teach people how to read? Like, what? What is these fucking ghouls? Their priorities. It's horrible. And when you go to Cuba and you see, again, reminder, how much Cuba cares about the rest of the world. Just like their doctors, Cuba sends teachers out to the rest of the world to help people in other impoverished areas learn how to read. We're going to see this in a bit. Cuba translated their educational materials that taught people how to read into any language for anyone who requested it. They would go teach people how to read in Braille. They would translate it to Braille. They would go to indigenous areas where the language was almost dead. They would translate their work into the indigenous language there to help keep the indigenous languages alive all over the world, not even in Cuba, right? They care so much about education and literacy. And these fucking guys out here are just like, no, it's bad actually. Right? Just like, fuck these capitalist losers. They are losers. So one of the other things I want to point out about this, it's politically motivated, is that one of the things we see consistently is that in places doing socialism, places that have a socialist revolution, literacy and education becomes a primary concern. Literacy in particular, one of the first things the communists do is teach everybody how to read. That's important to us. And I'm going to talk about why. And there is a political reason. So when we look at the United States, we all know, obviously, we're in a literacy crisis, right? They probably think the kids cheated on their tests because that's how capitalists get through school, Lord Oxium. Exactly. They're like, how are they doing so well? They must be cheating. I couldn't do this. We know in the United States today we have a literacy crisis. Like, we've all heard USA literacy crisis. Let's look it up. Let's have the convo. It's bad. It's really bad. So, here we have multiple people reporting on it. This one says that in 2024, according to the National Literacy Institute, 21% of American adults are illiterate. 1 in 5 American adults are illiterate. And this is not something that happens by chance. This is something that's a matter of policy, right? So similarly to capitalists wanting to keep you illiterate, communist socialists want to get you literate. And that is why whenever communists come to power, the first thing they do is launch these massive literacy campaigns, because they want you to learn how to read. And they want you to learn how to read for a few reasons. First, they want you to be able to read Marx. They want you to be able to read about socialism. They want you to know what's going on, what our country is fighting for, because you're a part of it. They want you to know what you're fighting for. And you can't do that if you can't read the text. So number one, politically, to get you politically literate, politically educated, and engaged in your political system, which they want, you have to be able to read to do that. So the first step is teaching you how to read so that you can have political power. You cannot have political power if you are illiterate. There is no political power that comes with being illiterate. The first step to political power is literacy. And that's why here in the United States, we're like, keep them illiterate. Keep them fucking down there. It does not benefit us to teach people how to read. It doesn't. It just doesn't. And in fact, the only time that the United States was performing well at all in education, when we started investing in public education, is when we were competing with the USSR, because the USSR was kicking our asses in the space race. Because the USSR was kicking our asses in the space race and in technology, the United States was like, fuck, we need to start investing in education hardcore. They started coming up with all these programs, especially, though, to get Americans into STEM, just so we could compete with the USSR. How can we access their educational material? I bet they probably posted it online. But also, I'm willing to bet if you wrote to, like, the Cuban Literacy Center or something like that, they would probably get you in touch with people who would send it to you. They're very, very, very helpful people. So I would just look up the Cuban Literacy Center and get in touch with them and be like, is there a place I can access these in this language? And they would know. That's where we went, and they knew a lot about everything. It was very, very cool. So, yeah, this kind of literacy thing, it is politically motivated. And that's why when you look at China, they have like universal literacy. When you look at the DPRK, they have universal literacy. And when you look at Cuba, their literacy is very, very high. Their general education is very, very high. And it's not a coincidence. And I've said this so many times already in the past 2 weeks. You're probably sick of hearing it. But talking to the average Cuban farm worker, I was like, holy shit. These people are probably more politically literate, more educated than like the average American congressperson. Right? Definitely than the average American. And it is very surreal and disturbing to go from walking around a country where the average person you talk to on the street understands politics. They understand what capitalism is. They understand what fascism is. They understand what communism is. They understand what socialism is. They understand what's happening in the world. Not only do they understand what's happening in Cuba, they understand what's happening in your country. They understand what your government's doing. They understand what your government's doing in Iran. They understand what's going on in different countries throughout Africa, what those countries are doing to each other. The average person in Cuba is walking around with such a high level of education, such a high level of political and regular literacy, verbal literacy, that coming back to the United States after experiencing that is like, whoa. Like, you notice it. You're like, oh, we're dumb. Oh, we're fucking dumb. And you see it. And it is such a culture shock coming back to that from Cuba. And not just the United States. I mean, I've traveled, I've been to like, over 30 different countries internationally. I've never experienced, but I haven't been to a socialist country. Cuba's the first socialist place I went to. And I've never experienced such a high level of general and political literacy amongst a just regular population of people as I did in Cuba. We revel in our dumbness, yes. And it's politically advantageous for our ruling class to keep us ignorant, to keep 1 in 5 American adults illiterate. That benefits them because they don't want you to know things. They don't want you to research things. They don't want you to read things. They don't want that, right? I would love to go to Vietnam, yes. So this is by design. So if the capitalist ruling class wants to keep you dumb and unable to read, right? That's why we say one of the most revolutionary things you can do is read, educate yourself, read, educate yourself. We keep telling people this over and over and over again because that's an act of resistance. To learn things is an act of resistance. The government wants you to not know what's going on in the world. The government doesn't want you here in the United States thinking, that Cuba has a great education system. They want you reading clickbait by that guy we just saw who I said I was going to beat up in a parking lot, saying, no, they don't actually have a good education system. They're just cheating on all their tests. That's what we want. And we don't want you looking into the actual reports. We don't want you looking into the actual data because that would involve reading beyond a headline. So we're going to make sure you can't read beyond a headline, or you're highly discouraged from reading beyond a headline. So this is why we tell people that reading and educating yourself is the most revolutionary thing you can do, right? And this is really a part of it. So it's also getting worse, the American literacy situation. It is getting worse, and I think that's important to note as well. I've noticed a huge shift. Earlier today in my TikTok chat, somebody was like, when did you start learning about left-wing politics? And I was like, probably when I was around like 12, I would say. And this guy was like, there's no 12-year-old who's learning about politics, who's reading political literature at 12. And I was like, that's sad. Because, yeah, that was normal when I was 12. Me and all my friends were reading political literature at 12 because we were interested in punk rock, and punk rock was political. We were listening to bands who wouldn't even sell you t-shirts unless you bought political merch first. And apparently you don't have that anymore. That was normal for us. We would bring the Communist Manifesto to school with us, right? And it's just not normal anymore. I don't know how old he was. He gave strong, like, older Gen X energy, you know? Like the high end of Gen X, right? 60s, maybe. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe he was younger. Maybe he was Gen Z. I don't know. But whatever it is, I do think that we have just come to expect that ignorance is normal, right? Very, very interesting. Now, on top of this, I have this text that I want to show you guys. This is the era I grew up in. This is July 2006. This is George W. Bush's first presidency. So the first year I could vote was 2004. Oh, this was the second presidency, I think. Sorry. The first year I could vote was 2004. And this would be 2 years after I was first able to vote. So 2004 is when I registered Peace and Freedom Party. So this is Condoleezza Rice. Remember when I told you guys Republicans do identity politics better than Democrats do? Condoleezza Rice was, I remember, the first black woman I saw in a position of political power in the United States. This was her. And she was extremely conservative Republican. Extremely conservative Republican. I'm sure there were people, I'm not saying she's the first black woman who had a massive amount of political power in the United States. This was just an important figure from my childhood. Like, I as a teenager, saw this woman on the news a lot. So this is for me specifically. So this is who wrote this, Secretary of Chair. And then Carlos Gutierrez, who was Secretary of Commerce, co-chair. So, Commission for Assistance to a Free Cuba. And I want to talk about this. This is a 93-page document. Insane. And it's all about helping Cuba. It's really a document pushing for regime change of Cuba, right? Thanks. And there's a whole section on their educational system that starts on page 49. And the section on the educational system is really interesting for a few reasons. It talks about how it's based on a Soviet model of combining education, physical labor, and political ideology to indoctrinate youth. And this is just rich coming from the United States. Did anybody here not have to take PE classes in school? I had to take PE classes in school. I did physical labor in school. It's very, very weird. Yeah? Very strange. You took dance instead of PE because you're gay? Okay, I also took gay PE. Did you guys have gay PE, or is this just California? My gay PE was juggling and fencing. I had to take gay PE too. Gay PE, yeah. Yeah, if you're too gay and they figure out you're going to get bullied by everyone else doing physical activity, they put you in a room with a bunch of other weirdos who are also too gay for regular PE, and then you just do something gay together, and they're like, good enough. That's fine, whatever, fuck it, man. Ours was a room of a bunch of weirdos, taught by, like, the guy in charge of our drama department, and he just taught us how to juggle and fence. I got kicked out of gay PE, though. I completed juggling, but by the time we got to fencing, the head of the class hated me so much. Teachers hated me. I don't know if you guys know this. All my teachers hated me. Half the teachers hated me. Half the teachers really liked me. Half the teachers hated me. And I was annoying. So if you don't know this lore about me, I graduated from high school a year early. I was a junior and I was valedictorian. I was also the captain of the debate team. I was the youngest person in my school district to take calculus. I was very good at school. I've always been very, very good at school. I've also always was the kid in class, always been the kid in class. It was like, that's not what really happened. That's not how that actually happened. The textbook's wrong. Here's what actually occurred. And I would get kicked out of a lot of classes. Like a lot of classes. And the teachers who hated me really hated me because there was no way to discipline me because I would just do like great on all the tasks. Like school just works for my brain. And because I went to a very, very, very low income school, and I've talked about this before if you don't know this, when you go to a very, very low income school in the United States, if you test very high, and I tested very high, I tested in the 99.99th percentile for every standardized test I ever took from kindergarten through graduation, for every section of every standardized test. When that happens in the United States, your school is compensated if it is a low income school based on test performance. So the principal would pull me aside and negotiate with me basically because they needed my test scores for the school to get funded. So it was always this weird thing where I had like strange power over the school. Our SATs were different because I'm older. They added new stuff for you guys. So I don't even remember my SAT score, but I do know they added a whole section for you guys so the numbers don't even translate anymore basically after me. So exactly, yeah, we can't discipline Madeline, too good of an earner. Yes. So this was the problem. So, and I also had really bad attendance at school because I would just ditch class to go to work because my home life was a little unstable. I've been working since I was 14, and I would cut class so I could go to work to save money to get my own apartment. I got my own apartment when I was 17 years old. So they would sit me down and they'd be like, we need you to come on this day because it's standardized test day. And I'd be like, well, I have work that day. I can't go. And they'd be like, what can we do to get you here on Tuesday? That would be the vibe. It'd be like a negotiation. I'd be like, oh, let's talk about it. You know, so this was the kind of relationship I had with the staff. So it was a very, very, very weird relationship. So whatever. So I got put in gay PE, and the teacher for gay PE hated me. Was one of the teachers who hated me. And when it came to fencing, we got into a fight about something. And he was like, well, you're so verbally abrasive. I can't have you around fencing foils because I fear you might become physically abusive. And I remember him saying this. And my fencing partner was my friend Jillian. And I was like, what do you think? You mean I'm going to like stab Jillian with a fencing foil or something? Like, what are you fucking talking about? First of all, they have a rubber tip. Second of all, these things are flimsy as hell. Like, third of all, I don't hate Jillian. I love Jillian. I don't like you. And then he just flipped out and he kicked me out of the class. So I couldn't even do gay PE. And I needed the credits for PE. So I had to get a doctor's note. And I didn't go to the doctor ever. But my mom was really hot. So my mom knew a doctor who thought she was really hot. So he wrote a note to excuse me from even gay PE. Because I got kicked out of gay PE as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wild experience. Yeah, that was, so, whatever the case. Physical labor is also necessary in American public schools, is the moral of that story. And if you can't do it regular, sometimes they make you juggle, if you're gay enough. If you're gay enough, you get to juggle. Hot mom privilege. I have a lot of this is the thing, people are always like, recognize your privilege, and I'm like, yes, sure, whatever, fine. The hot mom privilege has gotten me more in this life than anything else. If you have a hot mom, you're unstoppable on this planet. I'm convinced. I got assaulting a police officer reduced to a traffic violation because my mom is hot and a lawyer had a crush on her. Like, hot mom privilege. We did not have money. We did not have power. But I had a hot mom. And men with money and power wanted to impress her a lot, which meant sometimes they would help me out. You know, your mom was a bandana top bartender when you were in high school. Virgo gets it. Virgo gets it. This is hot, trashy mom privilege. The closer your mom is to Erin Brockovich in this world, you know what? It's like, you're going to accomplish things. You're going to accomplish things. It's wild. Your 6th grade PE teacher had you fold laundry sometimes instead of playing sports. They know. It's like the PE teachers could sense the gay in us, and they were like, well, that's not going to work with that one. I can't make that one do a push-up. It might die. If I make that one do a push-up, I got a lawsuit on my hands. Similarly, in 8th grade, I was in PE and they were doing dodgeball. And this goes along with me being very political, even in 8th grade. And I was like, I'm not doing that. That's simulated warfare designed to turn me against my fellow students. And I won't do that. We stand together. I'm not going to battle my fellow students. Those are my comrades. And so I refused to do it. And I gave this whole political reason I wouldn't do it. I said it violated my politics, my personal politics, my ethics, and I wouldn't do it. And the teacher was super annoyed. I was like, whatever, Hanson. Fucking fine. And you guys might not know this. Pendleton's my middle name. It's my family name. It's my grandmother's last name. And we all get it as our middle name. My actual last name's Hanson. So I'm Madeline Pendleton Hanson. So, they made you work out. I'm so sorry. So, but then my team lost. And then my team lost, so we had to do push-ups. And they were like, okay, Hanson, get out there, do your push-ups. Your team lost. And I was like, I already didn't get credit for the day. I'm not going to do push-ups. That's like doing push-ups for you for free. Why would I do that? I already got no credit for the day. What, are you going to give me less than 0 credit? And the guy was like, what? And then I was like, well, so you gave me 0 credit for the day because I sat out the class. So why would I do the push-ups? And he was like, well, you have to. And I was like, why? That doesn't make sense. So then we were negotiating, going back and forth. And then finally I was like, so you are going to give me partial credit for the day if I do the push-ups then? And he's like, no. And I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that then. So we got so mad. So I had just moved in with my mom. My dad had raised me up until this point, and I just moved in with my mom. And I didn't know my mom very well. Like, I didn't know her when I was a kid much. So I didn't know what to think. And he was like, I'm calling your mom. And I was like, well, I don't know how this is going to go. Okay. So he marches me in the office and he calls my mom. And my mom, she's a libertarian. She's a goth libertarian. She was a goth chick in the 80s. She's a libertarian. So I don't know what to expect. So sometimes my mom's cool, the way libertarians are cool, and that, like, she hates the cops, like, a lot, and she'll fight with them and shit. But sometimes she's weird about shit, right? So I didn't know how it was going to go. So the PE teacher calls my mom and is like, yeah, I got your kid here, and tells the whole story. And it's on speakerphone. They always put them on speakerphone because they want your parents to hear. They want you to hear your parents being disappointed in you, right? So it's on speakerphone, and I'm waiting. I'm like, I don't know how this is going to go. And my mother goes, let me get this straight. You attempted to make my child participate in simulated warfare activity, violently attacking their classmates, children, I might add. And when my child refused, you attempted to make the losing team of children get down on their hands and knees and degrade themselves before you and the winners. And I was like, libertarian mom for the win right now. Libertarian win for, like, right now. She is associating my teacher with authority. She thinks my teacher is being a cop, so she fucking hates this guy. And it was pretty cool. I was like, yes, oh, take that. I was like, oh, checkmate, stupid PE coach. Anyway, this is a long diversion of personal stuff. Just to let you know, we also do physical labor in our educational system. All right. Rare Madeline mom win. Yes. She had a few. She came out with some hits sometimes. Broken clock. That's all I'm saying. Okay, I'm going to drink some tea. I think my tea's cooled down now. And we're going to get back into this fuck-ass George W. Bush era Condoleezza Rice anti-Cuba bullshit. Okay, so they're over here saying Cuba's educational model or system is based on the Soviet model of combining education, physical labor, and political ideology to indoctrinate youth. We do that in the United States. We do the fucking Pledge of Allegiance to our flag every single day. We learn George Washington good. In Florida, they just introduced those anti-communist classes to teach you communism is the devil in public schools. We do this, and we don't even get a good education out of it. So fuck these people, right? So they're saying these textbooks are ideologically skewed, even though Cuba has one of the highest literacy rates. Independent thought's not encouraged or allowed. Who here got kicked out of class for not doing the Pledge of Allegiance? I did, all the time, right? Speaking of independent thought not being allowed, ideologically skewed, indoctrination, right? They say adolescent students are sent away to poorly run work camps in the countryside. They're taught farming. They're taught how to farm. Specifically because you instituted a massive blockade against the Cuban island, and food security is one of their primary concerns. But okay. Because of an exodus of seasoned educators to jobs in the tourism industry, the Cuban educational system relies on teachers in training, including 18-year-old high school graduates. Their teachers are doing fine. Their teachers are great. Oh, Mormons don't do the Pledge of Allegiance? See? Utah, what did I tell you? I always tell you guys The Mormons are this close to being a Brooklyn lesbian polycule. They raise their children in common, right? They're just, when that guy's gone, get that guy out of there. They're just women hanging around baking bread, sewing dresses, living together as a polycule. They don't do the Pledge of Allegiance either? Okay, see? There's something there. There's something there. There's potential there. We can fix Mormonism. That's all I'm saying. Okay? I just feel like we can fix it. So this is kind of, though, the anti-communist bullshit going on with the Cuba, anti-Cuba education things. You did the pledge in Utah, graduated in 17. Okay. Well, mixed. We got mixed feedback from the audience here. So they go on to talk about things they want to help the Cuban education system with, right? The United States is going to help Cuban education. Never mind the fact that their education system's better than ours. One of the other really funny things that's pointed out here is one page here. Let me take a look at this. Where is this document? I'm trying to find this one actual document. Examination of U.S. intentions. Here we go. So the first document we were looking at, there's a section of it that actually talks about the response to the United States coming out with that. And they say here, this is what it is. Examinations of U.S. intentions to transform Cuba's education system. And they talk about the document we just saw. And they say President George W. Bush announced the creation of a commission for assistance to a free Cuba that would draw upon experts within our government. Condoleezza Rice? Like, what does she know about education? To plan for Cuba's transition from Stalinist rule to a free and open society. So this is a fun one to tell the left comms. Why do you talk like George W. Bush? Why are you out here saying Stalinist like George W. Bush? Yeah, it's fucking weird. Ugh. What are they doing? So they're talking about this, and the person who wrote this paper that I sent the link to earlier in the chat, and they talked about how it was also made under the chairmanship of Secretary of State Colin Powell, the same guy who came out with that like weird fuck-ass map of Korea where the north is all dark and then the south is made super, super artificially bright because the fishing boats are like shooting like their weird islands with Las Vegas-style stretches of neon going on. Yeah, that's him, Colin Powell. He helped make this document as well, the same guy who helped make that thing. And they talk about this, and this person says, the problem is that all these suggestions that the United States government is like, we could help Cuba's education system like this, in that weird document we were looking at, they say, first of all, several of them have already been implemented by President Bush, including increased travel restrictions and additional funding for specific programs to promote change in Cuba's economics and government. That's regime change operations. The report also includes 27 pages and over 50 specific recommendations for reforming Cuba's education system. And they talk about a few of these here. And they go on to basically say in here, for example, the recommendations associated with providing equal access, increasing parent involvement, creating curricula, providing incentives for youth to stay in school, promoting literacy, increasing vocational training, and supporting the arts seem appallingly nonsensical since Cuba already excels in each of these aspects. The school life expectancy for youth in Cuba is 14.4 years, according to UNESCO. More than 2 years greater than the 12 years the report is recommending the youth be expected to complete. So, this is how propaganda works, right? The United States government comes out with this fuck-ass document saying, oh my God, the poor people of Cuba, we're going to help them do better. And the things we recommend they do are things they're already doing better than that. They're already exceeding that. They're already outperforming our recommendations, but it doesn't matter because it's not actually about the recommendations. This is a propaganda tool. This is a propaganda tool that comes along with the press release to get you to think Cuba is so bad and in need of saving, right? Everything in Cuba is so bad and in need of saving. So that's the Republican way of doing it, that they're bad at everything and we need to fix them. The Democrats are doing the same thing. The liberals are doing the same thing, but what they're saying is they're falling apart because of the sanctions. People are dying. They're spreading the misinformation about people in hospitals dying on ventilators because they want you to think socialism is incompetent. Both of them want you to think socialism is incompetent, but in different ways. And the reality, as we've talked about, the correct way to position this is that Cuba does suffer from the blockade. The blockade does make life harder for them than it needs to be. It is cruel. It is bizarre. But they are kicking ass despite it. They are an impoverished nation because of the blockade, and they are kicking ass despite it. And that's really the framework we as socialists need to have here, right? So let's look at the irony in the raw figures. We have this data here. There's some definitions here. I'll get you guys the tiny URL for this so you can take a look as well. Just the raw figures. Let's compare the United States education system to Cuba's. And when you look at this, it's pretty appalling. The terms here are laid out here, the definitions. So when we look at these, children out of school, children who are not in primary school, the United States is third in the world for that, of children not even going to school, right? And that's raw population. As a percent, though, of population, the United States is ranked children out of school primary per 1,000. 5.64 children are out of school per 1,000. Cuba only has 2.49, right? So when we keep going down and we look at this, here, college and university gender parity index, Cuba has better gender parity representation in college than the United States does. All right? Okay, so it's true there's only like 9 years of compulsory education duration, and the United States has 12, sure. But remember, that report showed that actually Cubans are going to school for 14.4 years. Why? Because college is free. College is free. So yeah, they only need to go up to here, but college is free. And we're going to talk about how their college system works. And it's really, really cool. So they're actually going to more school than the United States because they're just going on to not required, but encouraged schooling beyond that, right? So literacy, their female literacy rates are 97% for Cuba, 99% it says for the United States, but we know that our literacy is not actual literacy. It's people are functionally illiterate, and they have the same kind of general figures. Cuba, though, as impoverished as it is, even in these general literacy figures, 97% literacy rate. The United States, with all our resources in the world, 99%. However, out of these, 1/5 of American adults are functionally illiterate, meaning they might be able to read words on a page, but they're not really comprehending things. They're not really able to read and comprehend what's going on. And that's really the difference between reading at a 6th grade level or not, being functionally illiterate, etc., right? You're not comprehending. You can follow simple instructions on a page, but you're not really comprehending what's going on. So even with the mass financial disparity between these two countries, Cuba's holding its own or outperforming us in like every category, which is absolutely wild to watch happen. Now, observers have also seen this, and what observers are seeing is like, okay, the education it feels like people are getting in Cuba is actually a stronger education than what we're getting in the United States. And this is just anecdotal from observers, right? And this is a Huffington Post lived out article from 2008. But this is from somebody saying, our Cuba school is better than ours. And this is from somebody named Martin Carnoy. So this article says, Sylvia came to Miami from Cuba in the early 1960s when she was just 8 years old. And for the past decade, she's been helping resettle Cuban families who arrived from the island to Miami. We met at a seminar of Cuban American academics in May in a session discussing economic and social conditions of Cuba. She told me when she first started her work, her main concern was that the school-age children she helped would have a hard time adjusting to American schools because she, though, had not had this problem when she arrived, she said. To her amazement, when she checked on how the first kids she placed were doing, the principal of the school told her they were far ahead of the other students in both reading and math. So the teachers were just focusing on teaching them English. Even that was not much of a problem, though, because they were catching on fast. Sylvia told me this experience was repeated again and again. Cuban immigrant children coming from Cuban schools into Miami's Dade County system were usually as good at reading and mathematics as the very best students in their new school. All right? There is no systemic evidence that can prove Sylvia's story to be true. Cuba has never participated in the international tests that students take, so they don't have the exact one-to-one comparison. However, they're saying that a lot of people are seeing something similar, and we can compare them to other schools. Cuban 3rd and 4th graders took a Latin American test in 1997, sponsored by UNESCO. 3rd and 6th graders took a second round of that survey in 2006. And in 1997, 13 Latin American countries participated, and in 2006, 17 countries did. And in 1997, Cuban students scored much higher than the Latin American average and much higher than the second highest scoring country, Argentina. So not only were they number one, they were number one by leaps and bounds. And this person did a bunch of research on this. It was like, oh, okay, I'm going to figure out why Cuban 3rd and 4th graders are doing so well. And they said, what I saw convinced me that the achievement differences were no fluke. I videotaped and analyzed 3rd grade math lessons in Cuba, Brazil, and Chile. The Cuban classes were well taught, Cuban teachers well trained, and Cuban schools responsibly administered. I ended up writing a book with 2 of my students about Cuba's educational success called Cuba's Academic Advantage. I couldn't say anything in the book about my suspicions, but I was fairly sure that despite Cuba's obvious lack of resources, the 3rd graders I filmed there were doing better in math than most American students I have observed. Now, when I show you videos from elementary schools, Cuban elementary school later, you're going to see at one point, I believe this is included, we asked what their favorite subjects were in school. Almost everyone said math. Everyone loved math. And I was like, in my schools growing up, everyone hated math. And I know this because I was always really good at math. So I was the youngest person in my school district to take calculus. Everyone was like, I don't know how you're doing. Like, why do you even want to take calculus? Like, oh my God, this is like, why do you like math so much? None of my peers liked math. Everyone hated math. And these little kids were like, math is my favorite subject, right? So whatever they're doing to teach kids math there, it's working. It's engaging them more. So when UNESCO's report came out, this author was like, I was eager to see how these students had fared in the 3 countries I'd studied, and not much had changed in 2006. Cuban students were, again, in a league of their own, but we were still only able to compare them to Latin America because of the testing. However, one thing did change since 1997. 7 countries who had participated created a bridge between them and the United States. So they took tests against Cuba. They also took tests against the United States. And because Cuba didn't take those tests, though we didn't have that data, but they were able to kind of triangulate an estimate within reason, right? So they were talking about this, and they were like, well, we could then compare these estimates with how well U.S. students actually did. And Sylvia and my hunch that Cuban education may be better on average than Americans turned out to probably be right. According to my calculations, Cuban students would have scored higher in math than the average score of U.S. students. Cuban 15-year-olds would have achieved about 499 in mathematics and 501 in reading on the PISA 2006. U.S. 15-year-olds scored 474. In the PISA 2003, it was 486 in math and 496 in reading. So Cuban students would have probably outperformed American students as best these educators could tell, right? So this is something that, teachers are noticing, educators are noticing, and raw data pretty much confirms is true. And even when we look at their literacy rates, we say, okay, 97% compared to the United States, 99%. But what does a United States 99% literacy rate really look at? Like, we know what it looks like today. It looks like a literacy crisis. It looks like people reading at a 6th grade level, right? And I can just tell you, talking to, again, the average person working in a farm in Cuba, it felt very different than talking to the average person who even has a college degree in the United States. Someone with a bachelor's level degree. Maybe not somebody with like an advanced level degree, like a doctorate or like a master's or something like that. But I was like, oh, shit, this is different. And you could tell. You could tell talking to the average person. Just anyone you stopped on the street and talked to them, they seem to be performing with a much higher level of education behind them when they were talking about current events, when they were analyzing what was going on in geopolitics. There was a level of, it seemed like, academic performance just in their casual conversations with you. It was very, very interesting. Yeah, the Cuban president should release a document of suggestions for U.S. education changes to help us out. Autistic Maddie 3, right? And he was a teacher! The Cuban president was literally a teacher! What do you think talking to the average person in the U.S. who owns a farm in the United States would show? I presume they are also semi-literate. I would say probably yes, because a lot of farm owning here, we tend to think of farmers as being like this romanticized idea in the United States of like subsistence farmers. They tend to be business owners. They're capitalists. I come from the California Central Valley where there's a lot of farming. Even small farm owners there, petite bourgeois farm owners there, they're massive multi-million-dollar operations. They're business owners, more than farmers. And they do tend to have a good understanding of farming. But Fresno State, which is in the town I grew up in, they have a massive agricultural sector. So you would go to school for farming to learn about these things, and then to own a farm business, basically. That's a very common thing. So you'd get general ed, but I would say you'd have some baseline level of education, but it'd be like any average person with a bachelor's degree in a specialized field who is just doing some level of general ed to complete their degree. I don't think it would be particularly high. It would be higher than the average American probably, but not particularly high. I don't think it would compare to the average Cuban farm worker who didn't have an advanced degree of any kind. A lot of the smaller farms in your area, Glen, Shatter Skull, are Yale-educated libs. Interesting. Yeah, very, very interesting. Yeah, a lot of these farmers, and again, I'm not talking about people who just, like, have farms, people who, like, subsistence farm or grow food on their own. You guys know I fuck with that shit. Like, I love that shit. I grow food. I like growing food. I think it's cool. But no, in the United States, they're business owners. They're business owners, and they do a lot of fucked up shit to the land to maximize their profits. They exploit immigrants. Immigrant and migrant farm workers are heavily exploited by these farm owners. You know, I know Cesar Chavez just got canceled, but the whole farm workers movement was about that. It was about them being exploited by farm owners. And it's important to remember, right? Ag degrees include just as much business management as they do agriculture. Yeah, totally. And growing your own food is based because it hurts farmers. Yeah. And it is funny, if you haven't grown up around farmers, you might be like, wait, what? But if you've grown up in areas surrounded by agriculture, you're like, yeah, those people are fucking evil. Like, Jesus Christ. It can be pretty bad. It can be pretty bad. Not all of them. Some small farms, some farming cooperatives, you know, there's some cool stuff. Like, if you go to, like, farmers markets, sometimes it's evil people, but sometimes it's just, like, little small farming collectives. That stuff's fine. But you know, generally speaking, yeah, our agriculture industry is heavily exploitative and very, very fucked up here. California farmers aim for about $1,000 in profit per acre of the land low end. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Farmers in New York have very bigoted signs on their property. Yeah, they tend to be chauvinists, very regressive. Oh, you have a black-owned farmers collective in your city. That's really cool. That's really cool. And that's why I think, like, urban gardens are so important when you have community gardens. That stuff is so cool. My partner used to volunteer at the Compton Community Garden here, and I always try to, like, egg my partner into doing, like, more organizing stuff. And one day I was like, oh, it's really cool that you, like, did this. And they thought that I was, like, dissing it, like it was a small task. They were like, oh, you know, like, I've done more than that, though. And I was like, no, I think this is very, very cool that you did this. I think that these kinds of community gardens are so, so important, you know? And I think it's really amazing when people do work like that. Very cool. Yeah, a lot of them remind you of landlords. They're like that. Yeah, they're the lords of the land for the food growth. Yeah. Yep. It's very, very cool. Yeah, farmers act like they don't get paid. They love reminding you where your food comes from as if you stole it. Yeah. They are definitely... And some of them are straight up bourgeoisie. Like, some of them are straight up massive industries. You know, major corporations of corporate farming. It's huge. Okay, so... we see all of this, and we're thinking about Cuba and how they got to this point, right? How did Cuba get to this point where just the average person working in a farm or not, very, very literate, very politically literate, very educated, very intelligent, leaps and bounds away from talking to the average American. I know that's anecdotal, but I was just very, very struck by it. I was like, holy shit. Especially because you guys see what I go through on TikTok. I'm like, people are dumbasses. The average American is a dumbass. And you get so depressed by it. You're like, oh my God, there's no hope. How do we educate all these people? How do we get all these people caught up to speed? They've been so left behind by our educational system. They're so propagandized. But more than that, they're encouraged to not think. They're encouraged not to critically think. They're encouraged not to critically engage with the materials. They're encouraged not to dig deeper into things, not to look into things, not to do their reading. How are we ever going to get out of this? And then you go to Cuba and you're like, oh, they managed to do this, and with very limited resources. How? And the answer is they just prioritized it. So to talk about this, I want to talk about one major element of their immediate post-revolution education attempts, which is their literacy campaign. So for those of you who don't know, right after the Cuban Revolution, Castro was like, I want to eradicate illiteracy in Cuba. And this was their goal. And Castro said, I want to do it in 1 year. And everyone was like, that's crazy. But they did it. And they did it by really throwing everything they could at it by having volunteers of young doctors. Remember how that thing was, or young doctors, young teachers. Remember how that document from the United States was like, well, some of these were only 18-year-olds. In the literacy campaign, some of the educators were 14, 15 years old. And they would go out and teach people who were like 100 years old sometimes, living in the countryside in poverty, how to read. So it doesn't matter what age you are, right? This was a volunteer operation that mobilized all of the Cuban people to teach each other how to read in an organized, centrally planned fashion, and it worked. So there's a museum we went to honor this massive literacy campaign, and I'm going to show you the videos, and then I'm going to talk to you about the absolutely horrible, horrible things that the United States government did to try to stop this campaign from happening. Why? Because it made socialism look good, and it made the United States look bad. That's it. That's the only reason. It's the only reason we do all of this stuff, right? So let me find this video of the literacy campaign, and we're going to play it.
Of the Literacy Campaign Museum. Es un placer recibirlo. It's a pleasure for me to welcome you here in this morning.
Mi nombre es Lázaro Galano y soy el director del museo.
My name is Lázaro Delano. I'm the director of the museum.
Tengo 28 años
I'm 28 years old.
y además de ser el director del museo, soy profesor de historia de la Universidad de Ciencias
Besides
Pedagógicas.
being the director of the museum, I'm a history professor in this pedagogical university.
Me acompañan en esta mañana funcionarios de la universidad,
This morning I have here with me officials from the university,
la vicerrectora primera,
the first vice rector,
Suma Rosa Herrera Cuesta,
Sukma Rosa Herrera Cuesta.
profesoras de nuestra universidad,
They are also professors at our university.
funcionarias del municipio de educación
We also have officials from the Municipality of Education
y organizaciones de masa de nuestro país.
and also people from mass organizations in our country.
Se convirtieron los cuarteles militares en escuelas,
Garrisons and barracks were turned into schools.
como este, que era el antiguo.
So I want to talk about this really fast. So the complex where this museum is a massive complex, and it had been Batista's military camp. And I'll show you pictures after this, and you'll see. I could probably show you this picture now, actually. This was, where is it? Do I have it here? Oh, I don't have the picture here. There is a picture I have somewhere though, of where you can see Batista's house on the complex. But all of these areas, right? This is the literacy center that we looked at. All of them were on this massive complex, and this complex, I don't have pictures of the complex. I'm so bummed. Okay, well, I'll show you some other time. But this complex was on land that had been used by Batista's military. So there'd be an elementary school, a little college, like a pedagogy institute, a literacy center, all in this complex in old like soldiers' quarters. And one of the things Castro said during the revolution was, when we win, we're destroying your entire militarized, harsh dictator apparatus, because Batista was a harsh military dictator backed by the United States that ruled over and slaughtered the Cuban people. And it was like a symbol of their oppression, these military bases. And Castro said, we are turning those into schools, and we are educating the Cuban people. And this was a promise they made good on. So we got to actually go to one of these complexes, and that's what they're talking about here, that had been a military camp that they turned into an educational camp instead to help elevate their people.
Militar Colombia, hoy Ciudad Escolar Libertad.
Like this one, that was Columbia Barrack, and today Ciudad Libertad, Freedom City.
Donde tenemos todos los niveles de enseñanza.
Here we have all the teaching levels inside this compound.
Incluso escuelas para atender a niños con discapacidades.
Even schools for children with special needs.
Todas estas medidas tomadas por la revolución transformaron grandemente el país.
So all these measures taken by the revolution transformed in a great manner the country.
Pero hacía falta algo más, algo que impactara más directo en la sociedad.
But we needed something else, something that could be a real impact in society.
El 26 de septiembre de 1960, en la Organización de las Naciones Unidas,
September 26, 1960, at the United Nations,
el compañero Fidel Castro expresó en los Estados Unidos
comrade Fidel Castro expressed in the United States
que Cuba iba a ser el primer país de América que a cabo de unos años no iba a tener analfabetos.
Cuba was going to be one of the first countries in Americas that in some year wouldn't have any illiterate person.
En ese momento, algunas personas lo dieron por loco y se empezaron a reír.
At that moment, some people thought that he was crazy, or some of them even laughed.
Pero lo que no sabía era que ya se estaba preparando en Cuba la campaña de
But
alfabetización.
they didn't know that this campaign was already being prepared here in Cuba.
La campaña de alfabetización comenzó en enero de 1961 y culminó el 22 de diciembre de ese mismo año.
This campaign started November 1961 and ended in December 1961.
En un
They cleared Cuba of illiteracy in 1 year. In 1 year. Yeah, they moved, and then all of a sudden I was like, I'm right here. But yeah, 1 year's time, they managed to get rid of illiteracy in Cuba. Incredible, right?
Cuba se convirtió en el primer país libre de analfabetismo en América.
In 1 year, Cuba became the first country that got rid of illiteracy in Latin America.
Y ustedes se pueden preguntar, ¿cómo lo hicieron?
And maybe your question is, how did they do it?
Por eso se encuentran aquí en el Museo Nacional.
And that's why we are here in this
Alfabetización.
museum.
Único museo en el mundo que cuenta esta historia y toda la labor de Cuba en apoyo a la educación en otros
It's the
países.
only museum that tells about this deed and about literacy campaigns in the world.
Para realizar la campaña se creó la Comisión Nacional de Alfabetización.
To-
La idea era que cada persona que no supiese leer y escribir tuviese al menos un maestro junto con él.
The idea was that every person that didn't know how to read and write would have a teacher with him or her.
Por muy lejos que viviese la persona, por muy intrincada, hasta ahí llegó al menos un maestro a enseñarlo a leer y
It doesn't
escribir.
matter how far that person was living. It doesn't matter how remote the place was. Even in the sticks, those people will get a teacher.
A mi lado pueden observar el uniforme.
The uniform that this will
Okay, I cannot stop thinking about these outfits. This is just a Madeline because I'm a fashion person. These outfits are like I like a dream about. I'm like, how do I get this outfit? How do I dress like this? How do I dress like a 1960s Cuba literacy instructor? I need to be the Cuban literacy campaign teacher. Look at how fucking good this outfit, the hat, the stuff hanging off it, and the beaded necklace. I'm like, I would literally I like kept coming back. I would like come and I'd look at it, and then finally, I think Isra, the terrorist daughter of the congressperson who was with us, was like, I think it'll fit you. I was like, thank you. You can see I want it so bad. I want it. But look how little it is. Right? And that's because anybody who is literate could be assigned to be a teacher to anybody who is illiterate. So you had children sometimes teaching adults how to read. Anybody who knew how to read. They were just using the resources they had. I know, I want it so bad. Yeah, Cuban literacy drip. Oh, this rare niche aesthetic. Cuban literacy. Somebody tell the TikTok niche aesthetic girlies. They've started incorporating pastel DPRK buildings into their rare niche aesthetics. We need them to get on Cuba literacy drip as like its own rare niche aesthetic. We need that. Because I'm telling you guys, the only way we're going to do this is if we make it really fucking cool to be a communist. We have to make it so cool. And this is something they talked about actually on our trip, where Cubans say this: make the revolution irresistible. And we talked about this a lot. Like, how do you make the revolution irresistible? And that's what we need to do in the West, especially. You need to make it cool to be a communist. And how do we do that? And I think part of the reason we're struggling right now is we've lost our cool. We're so upset. We're so earnest, right? And in the era of like woke politics, that worked. That flew. People thought it was cool to care about things. So the more you could care, the more you could teach people, they were into it. Now, that's not cool anymore, right? People are very disaffected. People are very jaded. People are very cynical. People just want to be skinny and party. And it's hard because you don't want to tail that value system, but you need to make it cool. And there has to be like a level of nonchalance. So like, I'm constantly thinking about this. How do you make the revolution irresistible? How do you make it cool? And I think it has to be a level of nonchalance. And that's why I'm switching to not even explaining things to people. When I'm just like, fuck yeah, I support North Korea. And when people are like, why? I'm like, why would I not? Like, what? Huh? Girl, what? And I think that is actually more effective today than telling people, that's East Asia's Palestine. Like, we slaughtered those people. It's horrible. And while that's true, and you do have morality and ethics on your side, like, people are more recruited by general vibes. And it's like, we have to catch the vibe. We have to make the revolution irresistible, right? You're scared to look content you're moderating on TikTok? Oh my God. Scary. So yeah, I think that's interesting. I think that's just interesting for us to consider. And they talk about this in Cuba. They use a lot of culture. And we'll talk about this as part of the educational system as well, but I'll get ahead of it a little. When you go to school to be an artist, when you go to art school in Cuba, if you graduate, you're guaranteed a job as an artist. The Cuban government will support you just making art. Just making art, it's it. And so you end up with a lot of socialist art because 90% of Cubans are socialist coming out of Cuba. You end up with socialist rappers. You end up with socialist painters, poets, all this cool stuff. And it helps the people of Cuba stay interested in their revolution. And you'll see young people be like, yeah, the majority of young people do support the revolution. Some don't, because they see Cardi B and they think Cardi B's cool and they think the United States is going to make them live lives like Cardi B or whatever. But a lot of Cuban youth are very engaged with their revolution and their history still because it's cool to be into that there. There was one Cuban young guy wandering around. You'll see him. We interviewed him. He was great. His name is Damien. We hung out with him one day. Me and Lily just walked around town with him one day. He wore Che shirts. He's a Cuban guy walking around in a Che shirt. Why? Because Che's cool. Che's fucking cool. Any way you look at it, Che is cool. Everyone thinks Che is cool. Even Cubans, especially Cubans. And they're proud. They're like, fuck yeah, Che. Right? So, yeah, we need that. We need to make the revolution in the West seem irresistible the same way they do in Cuba. We need art. We need culture. There's like those rappers. I don't know if you've seen them on TikTok. They're two people rapping. And I noticed because they're always wearing cool shirts. Like they'll wear like, oh my God, who's the fucking guy? This rapper I used to like a lot. Of course, the only line I can remember is, I'll kill your aborted fetus, resurrect it, and kill it again. That's not a great... That's the only line of the song I can remember. Why? Don't judge that by that line. It's a good line. But whatever. He was this like really cool left-wing rapper. And he was all about Chicano liberation in California. Immortal Technique. And you knew from the line. Immortal Technique. Immortal Technique was cool, right? Even if you had never thought about American imperialism in Mexico, Immortal Technique made it cool for you to think about American imperialism in Mexico, right? And I went and saw Immortal Technique play in San Luis Obispo, I think, maybe, when I was a teenager, because I liked Immortal Technique. And he opened the set, and he was like, let's get one thing straight. We're not in Southern California. We're in Northern Mexico. And then he goes off. And it's like, you didn't have to be political to like Immortal Technique. You just liked him. And because he was cool, it became cool to support Mexico fighting back against the United States, right? So there's these two kids who are rappers. I say they're kids. They're probably in their early 20s. Right? And they're on TikTok right now. And they, like, rap about politics wearing Immortal Technique shirts and shit like that. And I'm like, this is cool. This is making the revolution irresistible. Right? Oh, yay. I'm so happy to hear that, first time chatter. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so glad. Yeah. So, yeah, we need that. We need that energy. And I think it's hard when the pendulum swing moves to effortlessness is cool, not giving a fuck is cool, because it does. It swings back and forth. It'll be very, very cool to be politically engaged. People will get burnt out. It'll become very cringe to appear politically engaged. People will move back in this direction of like, oh, whatever, I just want to party and do me. When that happens, like, I've been a socialist through that pendulum swing multiple times. How do you still recruit the masses? How do you get them? They don't need to be part of the vanguard, right? But at the very least, to not hate communism, to not regurgitate anti-communist talking points. How do we do that? How do we tap into that? So anyway, sorry. Just talking about the aesthetics of everything. Cuban culture, how the culture is imbued in every area of their revolution. And that is part of it. They make the revolution irresistible. It's cool to be Cuban, right? You're walking around the island and you're like, these people are fucking cool. They are. They just are. They read poetry. They make paintings. They're funny. They're smart as hell. They're cracking jokes. They have a great music scene. I mean, and that's with so few resources. Anyway, so I feel like that's just a lesson we can learn beyond this. But let's get back into literacy specifically.
Teachers were
que usaron los maestros en la campaña.
those teachers in the campaign.
Y en mis manos,
And here,
el farol,
this lantern,
símbolo de la campaña de
this
alfabetización.
became the symbol of this literacy campaign.
Hoy en Cuba tenemos algunas situaciones debido al abasto de combustible,
Today we're having some situation with the lack of electricity due to the lack of fuel,
pero están todas las instalaciones hechas.
but the installations are there.
En aquellos momentos no había ni tan siquiera instalaciones en muchos de los campos de
But
Cuba.
at that moment, there were not even electric grids in those country places.
Y gracias a una donación del pueblo chino llegaron los faroles.
And thanks to a donation from the Chinese people, we got these lanterns.
Faroles que sirvieron en gran medida para...
And you'll hear this. You remember from the episode we did about their government structure, a lot of things they'll just be like, oh yeah, China gave us that. Oh yeah, China gave us that. Oh yeah, China gave us that. So remember, a lot of people like to give China flack for not being more internationalist. When you're in Cuba, you're like, China's internationalist as hell. They've been helping these people with shit left and right.
y poder dar las clases en los campos.
This was used to have light for the farmers and to teach.
Un elemento importante es que los maestros vivieron en las casas con los campesinos.
An important element. These teachers lived with the farmers in the houses.
Y también tenían la orientación de, en la mañana, ayudar en las labores de la casa.
The orientation was, in the morning, you have to help in the house task
Y en los campos.
and in the fields.
Y en las noches era que se dedicaban a enseñar
And
a
then in
ti.
the evening and at night, it was when they were doing the teaching.
Un elemento importante que quiero
Another
mostrar
important element,
es esta bandera.
this flag here.
Eso,
Tira para acá.
tú sabes la situación. ¿Me entendieron? Pues,
Ay, no.
bien, por aquí.
Ajá. Yo no soy viejo en la casa, yo nunca he venido a estudiar aquí.
Tengo que hablar en otro idioma. Pues. Bien, estirar un poquitico más. Esta bandera es símbolo de libertad,
This banner here, this flag, is a symbol of freedom,
de emancipación,
emancipation.
como me comentaban muchos de ustedes.
Some of you were telling me about education.
Territorio libre de analfabetismo.
Territory that got rid of illiteracy.
Cada vez que se lograban eliminar los analfabetos en una provincia o en un municipio, se izaba esta bandera como símbolo de la campaña.
Whenever they finished this process of teaching people how to read and write,
Como
in
símbolo,
municipalities, in provinces, they hoisted
como símbolo de que ya no quedaban analfabetos en
as a
esa zona.
symbol that there were not more illiterate people in that region. Sí, yo creo que esto es
Tú sabes, tú sabes. Esta bandera es original,
This is an original flag, so we need to treat it with care.
como todos los objetos que pueden ver en este museo.
All the artifacts we are going to see in this museum are original.
Bien, ahora vamos a avanzar.
So let's
Bien. Al inicio de la visita le preguntaba a nuestra...
Power went out while we were there. Power went out and we had to do part of the tour and with the flashlights from our phones. So just a little daily glimpse. And this is what I mean, where I'm like, the blockade's fucked up. It is fucked up, right? Like, you're just going about your daily life and you're like, oh shit, I don't have power. And remember, when you don't have power, what do you lose? Internet. You lose internet, your cell service goes down. The cell towers don't get power. So your phone's a brick. It's just a flashlight. This stuff is fucked up. But again, it's not like they're starving to death. It's not like they're dying. All of the kind of like tragedy porn about Cuba that liberals want to push, it also simultaneously pushes the idea that socialism is a failure, is not correct. However, they don't need to be dying in the streets for us to acknowledge this is not a dignified way to let people live their lives, right? Let them just fucking have power. Who is this helping? This is crazy, right? So, thank God Russia got the oil tanker in. And that's great. But this is, I think, an appropriate representation of what it's like. And I will say, to me, the most dehumanizing thing when I was there about the power situation is what I mentioned, which is that if a lot of the buildings in Cuba are 2-story, 3-story, whatever, the water pumps don't work without power. So you can't get water up. So, like, having to be like, well, I guess I'm not showering for 26 hours. That's fucking annoying, right? That's the kind of stuff that's a little more dehumanizing and really, really hard. So, you know, just good to keep in mind.
Preguntaba a nuestra profesora que si ustedes participarían en la campaña. Bien. Al inicio de la visita le preguntaba a nuestra profesora que si ustedes participarían en la campaña.
Okay, I guess I didn't get it in the video, but there's maybe a picture I have. Hold on, let's see if I took a picture in the dark. Yes, here in this room. Yes, this woman is like 100 years old. She had been around since slavery in Cuba on sugar plantations. If not official slavery, after slavery. You know how after places would make slavery illegal, they'd be like, haha, just kind of. And then you would like actually just still end up in the same conditions. They had that in Cuba too. So she had basically been living in the middle of nowhere. If you look at this, these are the walls of her house. It's built out of like banana husks or like tree husks. It's not even a real house. She was still living, and the revolution had just happened. Like they just came to power, and they were like, okay. So they go out to her house. She's basically built this house herself out of like palm frond style. That's the closest thing I could think of. I was like, it's like a palm frond. And she's never learned how to read. And she was basically a slave working on plantation fields, sugar plantations her whole life. They went and they taught her how to read. This is the kind of stuff they did. So any age, they taught everybody how to read. And this is the kind of photos they had on that wall in basically the dark there. So let's see what other photos. I got some more photos in here. I'll show you guys all the photos right now. This is just their little logo. This is just a picture of the videos we saw. Mostly I was trying to surreptitiously take a picture of the outfit. That's that picture. Now we're going to talk about this, but you'll see it's martyrs of literacy. And we're going to, I don't want to give too much away, but we'll get into it. But how do you think the United States government responded to hearing that our dictator there, our guy, Batista, had been overthrown? This new guy, Castro's in charge, and he's immediately teaching people how to read. It's making us look bad. How do you think the United States government responded to that? We immediately got the CIA to start murdering the teachers who went to go stay with people and teach them how to read. So these are the martyrs of the literacy campaign. It became extremely dangerous to become a teacher because the CIA would start trying to kill you. They would kill you, and they would kill you bad deaths. Some of the teachers had their genitals cut off. They were hung with barbed wire. And the point was to try to discourage people from being literacy teachers. They would kill them in these barbaric, gruesome ways. And you saw the outfits. You saw the little statue, the little mannequin. Some of these were children. Some of these were 14-year-olds, 15-year-olds. And we'll get into this. It is horrible, horrible what we did to these teachers. And the point was to try to terrify Cubans so they wouldn't be teachers. And not just Cubans. Socialists from all over the world came to Cuba to help engage in the literacy campaign. Some of these names aren't Cuban people, right? Some of the people killed weren't even Cubans. They came from other nearby countries to help because they believed in the revolution. So, and it just emboldened them more. It made more people volunteer to go help. So it backfired. It backfired, and they completed the campaign. So this is a picture from after the campaign was completed. All the people took to the streets, and they're like, okay, that was the first thing they did with the revolution. That was Fidel comes to power, it's like, we're going to teach everybody to read in a year. And it happens. And this ends up making the people believe even more in the revolution. And they're literally like, okay, Fidel, what's next? And that's what they're saying. What's next? We did it. You're right. We could do this. What else can we do? What else are we going to do next? And that was the real spirit when the end of this had come around. It's very, very inspiring. Just love this. Viva nuestra revolución socialista. Oh, my computer charger isn't in here. I have to go grab my computer charger really fast. So I'm going to let the rest of this video play out. And I'm going to go grab my charger. But what I want you to pay attention to here, they're going to explain it, but I just really want you to focus on this. This is a blackboard in a school during Bay of Pigs. And I think I showed you guys this already, but it's a video of it. They were teaching them how to read at a school when the Bay of Pigs invasion happened, and American soldiers just shot through the blackboard. And you'll see there's just holes through this of American soldiers. And it really is symbolic. The Cuban people are out here trying to give life, trying to teach people how to read, how to uplift people. And the Americans are like, not on our fucking watch. And they shoot through the educational materials. Haitian names on the wall. Yeah. Yep. Haiti, as by any means necessary, is saying Haiti, the first rebellion of enslaved people that terrified the United States, terrified the white slave owners, right? Really a beacon to the rest of the colonized world, to show what you could do. And look, we've never forgiven Haiti for it. We've never forgiven Haiti for liberating themselves. The brutality of the colonizing class, of the colonizers, is just so so cruel. And the more you learn about it, the more you fucking hate capitalism and you hate these people. Okay, so I'm going to play this. I'm going to go grab my charger. This might end before I'm back, but we'll see.
Sure at the school.
Bien, ahora les pido por favor que me acompañen al museo para avanzar el tiempo. Van a observar en el pasillo imágenes de la campaña.
On the wall about the campaign. We share the little we have.
Esta misma idea de la educación,
So this same idea of education,
estos logros alcanzados,
the achievements that were gained,
Cuba no se quedó con ellos,
Cuba didn't get them for herself.
sino que llevó la luz de la enseñanza a otros países.
Cuba took this beacon of teaching to other countries.
Durante la primera década de los años 2000,
During the first decade of the year 2000,
la maestra y pedagoga cubana Leonela Relis
there was a Cuban pedagogue, Leonela Relis.
creó el método de alfabetización Yo Sí Puedo,
She created a literacy method, campaign method that is called Yes, I Can.
con el objetivo de eliminar los analfabetos en los distintos países del mundo.
The objective was to get rid of illiteracy in different countries of the world.
Como resultado de ello, fueron enviados maestros cubanos a más de 40 países.
As a result of this, Cuban teachers were sent to more than 40 countries.
Todos estos materiales que observan en esta
All
vitrina
these materials we see in this glass case
fueron utilizados en cada uno de los países.
were used in those countries.
Nicaragua,
Nicaragua,
Brasil,
Brazil,
Bolivia,
Bolivia,
Nueva Zelanda,
New Zealand,
Nigeria,
Nigeria,
España,
Spain,
Canadá.
Canada.
Cada uno de estos libros nos muestra la historia del método Yo Sí
These
Puedo en esos
books are
países.
showing us the history of that method in those countries.
Un elemento importante
An important element,
es que se logró traducir a cada uno de esos idiomas, a cada uno de esos países
we translated to the language of those countries,
al
this method,
idioma de
to
cada
the
uno de
language
esos
of those
países.
countries.
Otro elemento importante,
Incluso de América del Sur.
sí, acá abajo, sí. Otro elemento importante, y es que se llevó también el sistema braille y el lenguaje de señas para las
They
personas
even used
discapacitadas.
Braille system and language system to teach people that couldn't see.
La idea era eliminar los analfabetos en todos estos
The
países.
idea was to get rid of illiteracy in all these countries.
Hoy-
Use some of language.
Yeah, so what did they do? Cuba learns how to read. What do? Are they like, cool, thanks? No. They instantly are like, we're going to help others now too. And that's really the spirit of their revolution. That's how much they believe in internationalism. So yeah, they translated everything, and you could live on a house on a cliff, in the middle of nowhere on another continent halfway around the world. And a Cuban teacher would come to you. They would come find you. If you wrote and you were like, I need help. If you reached out, if you called, anything, they would be like, we'll come. And the translation of the text was really, really amazing. They left nobody out of this process. So we'll take a few more looks. This is more photos from their campaign. Love this, right? These are some of the books in different languages. Yes, I Can, Facilitator Handbook. This was the name. And it still goes on to this day. You'll see they have DVDs, they have videos. They still do this program. Oh, screen share. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't screen share. Here you go. So these are the materials. Right? So we have DVDs. Yo Si Puedo. That's the name of the effort. Here we go. And then here's also, let me see, the Here's some more pictures. These are ones I thought I showed you, but I didn't screen share. Sorry. See in there? Yo si puedo. There. That's what they're using to learn. Little picture of Che. It's very, very cool, right? Okay, that's the video again that we saw. Okay, so somebody in the chat asked, how do they know it was the CIA who was doing it? And, it's me, so of course I have some data for you, and we're going to talk about that. So, this was the same year that Bay of Pigs happened. Bay of Pigs being a militarized operation to try to overthrow the government. And I have some notes on that. I think we talked about that, but I'm going to refresh with the notes. Hold on, let me grab my notes really fast, and then we'll talk about this. Okay, Dragon Notebook, where we talked about this. So the thing about the Bay of Pigs is they went to some people who had fled the revolution, some Batista loyalists, and they got them together into a battalion, and they're like, we're gonna take back Cuba. The United States government did this, and they got people who fled to the United States. They got them together, and they tried to militaristically take back Cuba, and they failed. And that was Bay of Pigs. That was when they shot through the schools, and we saw all of that. That's not the only thing they did, though, right? That is not the only thing they did. I have my notes about the Cuban diaspora. Let's see if we have anything else in here. So that was in 1961. I just wanted to confirm the dates. Yeah. This was the same year as the literacy campaign. So this was not the only thing that they were doing. Gusano Dragon Notebook. Yeah. Gusano Dragon Notebook is here to lead us all. He's mad. He's pissed. This is Gusano Dragon Notebook. So we actually have a lot of information about the other things the United States was up to too. Now, this book is a book I recommend called The Cuban Counter-Revolution by Jesus Arboleda. And the counter-revolution was from the Gusanos, right? It was from the capital zoning class. And it was largely also from... This is what the United States does. You guys know I always say we have this policy where we go, not our guys. We just find some random dudes who like crime in a country where we don't like the owner of the country, the leader of the country, right? And we just find random dudes and we're like, hey, will you do like criminal activity for us? And we'll pay you a bunch of money. And they're like, yeah, sure. We don't have any political ideology whatsoever. We just like crime. So we do this all over the world. We did this in Cuba. We found random groups of men, like bandits, basically. And we were like, hey, we'll pay you a lot of money to go kill these people, kill these teachers for us. And they were like, okay, sure. So this is what it is. So the Cuban counter-revolution was these groups of paid men by the CIA. And this book goes into it in detail. So this is from archive.org. So I'm going to give you guys the link to it as well. Feel free, when we come back, I'll give you an opportunity to screenshot it if you hadn't already. And it talks about it quite a bit. Here is the link. All right. There's the link. And yes, for those of you who don't know, Operation Northwoods was when the United States considered bombing Miami and blaming it on Cuba to justify us overthrowing Cuba as well. So here's the book, The Cuban Counter-Revolution. And we're going to read some sections of it right now, but we're not going to read the whole thing, obviously, because it's a book. But I did find some specific sections to talk about. So we're going to start on page 75. Let me find it. So this section, from uprising to invasion. And I'll try to zoom for you guys, but it might be a little hard. So, on March 17th, 1960, President Eisenhower approved the implementation of the plans to overthrow the Cuban Revolution. Although the president's approval represented a quantitative and qualitative change, the policy was in fact already in effect. Since 1958, the U.S. government had been following the Cuban situation closely and had every intention of influencing it. They intervened in the domestic political conflicts in one way or another throughout 1959, and toward the end of that year, Washington had already drafted a policy of subversion that led to the rise of the first counter-revolutionary organization not linked to the Batistianos, they called them, right? The plan that the CIA originally proposed to Eisenhower consisted of a covert operation with 4 elements. First, it called for creating a political organization outside of Cuba that would spark the formation of the counter-revolutionary groups and provide the necessary legitimacy to the U.S. plan. Second, it proposed organizing a counter-revolutionary front on the island, formally subordinate to the Exile organization, but in fact under the leadership of the CIA. So I just really want to get this straight here. The first plan was to create an exile organization, political organization outside of Cuba, to try to spark counter-revolution inside of Cuba. Okay, bye Virgo. Thank you for everything. So this is the Miami Cubans. This is who these people are. This is where they come from. Some of them are actively involved. Some of them are descended from them now. And this is when we say that the Miami Cubans are the oppressors, historically, of the actual Cubans. They might still have family on the island. It doesn't really matter. They are people who, are very ideologically in opposition to the interests of the Cuban people. So this is the basis for the anti-Castro at the time, anti-socialist kind of counter-revolutionary group they wanted to build. Second, they said creating a counter-revolutionary front on the island, right? Who was subordinate to the Exile organization. So the diaspora community would oversee whoever they got on the island to work for them, but really they'd be under the leadership of the CIA. And the third was the need to develop a strong propaganda offensive that would include establishing radio stations directed at Cuba. Now, this is something we still have to this day, Radio and TV Marti. We're going to talk about this on Friday when we talk about the Cuban diaspora community. Radio and TV Marti are a part of the USAGM, the U.S. Agency for Global Media, and I am convinced Radio and TV Marti are the reason why we changed, was it the Helms Act that was changed? What's the name of the act? I can't remember the name of the act. Under Obama, up to Obama, there had been a law that Americans were not allowed to consume the propaganda the CIA and intelligence agencies created for outside countries to consume. And under Obama, that law changed to say if you requested it as an American, you could consume it. Well, just visiting a website now counts as requesting it, right? So you, as an American, now can stumble upon any propaganda around the world that we make to try to discredit our enemies in other countries. So Radio and TV Marti, my hypothesis has always been that that was the impetus for this, because the United States spent a lot of money setting up this news network that was supposed to target Cubans on the island, Radio and TV Marti, to tell them how evil socialism was, kind of a Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty thing, but people in Cuba instantly knew it was the United States and the CIA and did not like it. They were immediately like, what the fuck is this? And they would make fun of it, and they were not into it. But Cubans in Miami loved it. So I'm under the impression that that is the reason that Obama pushed to change the law so that Cubans in Miami could consume Radio and TV Marti. That's a personal hypothesis of mine. But we do know for sure that was true, that Cubans hated it and knew it was the American government immediately because they're fucking smart, and that Miami Cubans were like, no, we like it. We did know that happened. So, but yeah, so part of this propaganda effort was establishing radio stations directed at Cuba to try to convince them to overthrow their government. And finally, to develop a paramilitary force trained to infiltrate the island to develop clandestine and guerrilla operations. And Eisenhower approved of this project and said his only concern was the possibility of leaks compromising U.S. Participation, right? Everyone has to be ready to swear they never heard of this, is what he said. In the final analysis, the plan depended on the counter-revolution's capacity for mobilization inside of the country. Bye, Lord Oxium. Thank you for hanging around. Somebody said, moral of the story, if you teach media literacy and critical thinking, the U.S. is less effective. Exactly. So, in order to access the potentially counter-revolutionary sectors of Cuban society and organize them on behalf of the U.S.'s plans, the CIA sponsored the creation of the Frente Revolucionario. I could say this with the accent, but I can't say it in the Valley Girl accent and have it sound good. So I'm going to stick with Valley Girl for now. Revolucionario Democrático with the FRD. Its function was to provide legitimacy to U.S. policy and a catalyst for the development of the counter-revolutionary movement. But at no time was it conceived as the instrument assigned to truly head the process. That would always be the CIA, right? Like, totally. Revolucionario Democrático. Most of the organizations formed so far were conceived and organized from abroad, and their principal leaders remained at all times outside of Cuba. The creation of the FRD accelerated the formation of these organizations. So we talked about the CIA a little bit more, and the CIA was looking for diversity to represent these groups, right? But the FRD represented basically the most conservative tendencies in Cuban political thinking of the period. The testimony of Justo Carrillo demonstrated the political line that prevailed in the coalition. From the first meetings of the FRD, I concluded that despite some interventions by Aureliano Sanchez Arengo, the predominant style fit the old Cuban political mold. Batista, the right-wing dictator. Without any understanding of this sociological phenomenon that was taking place in Cuba and that was typically counter-revolutionary, meaning that the mental attitude of revoking as soon as possible all the revolutionary legislation that was being passed in Cuba. The first meeting called to organize the FRD was held in late February in Arlington, Virginia. It was hosted by CIA officer Frank Bender and was attended by Angel Fernandez Varela, Oscar Echevarria, and Jose Ignacio Rasco. At the meeting, the participants chose the potential members of the front, discussed the creation of a radio station aimed at Cuba, and planned the organization of a paramilitary force. Fernandez Varela was charged with contacting some of the potential constituents of the coalition and returning to Cuba to select a group of young men that would receive military training in the United States. In the following days, he contacted Artime, Tony de Verona, and Justo Carrillo. So, this is what they were up to. Verona requested $754,000 per month for operating this group, and he actually just received an average of $115,000 a month, which is still a lot of money in Cuba, right? $1 US dollar in Cuba goes a long way. So this is what they really set up, and this is when they kind of launched the Bay of Pigs situation. Now, all of this, though, is at the same time and is part of the same operations as the anti-literacy campaign. Let's see, page 116 talks about the literacy campaign in this book in particular. So let's see if I can get this. So in 1961, when they started the revolutionary government started the literacy campaigns, it says the reaction of these bands, right? These bands of random vigilantes that they had lumped together to basically be their paramilitary groups. Here, by early 1962, 500 men had organized into 41 bands operating in the former province of Las Villas and another blah, 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 was violent. The literacy brigades throughout the country were named after a volunteer teacher who ended up getting killed by the Escambray guerrillas. Later, the assassination at this time of the second volunteer and of a peasant who housed him led to the passage of a law that decreed the summary execution of any armed insurgent. So this was all going on, and this was all a part of this same exact thing. The guerrilla groups had their origins in the farming sectors, but they had been also comprised into these groups on the island by the CIA. So they talk about this a lot in this book. The CIA's army, and that's part of Operation Mongoose. So Operation Mongoose was the loose plot to overthrow Castro that included the 600 plus assassination attempts of Castro by the US government. And this is all talked about here, right? The CIA's army. The leader of the revolution was designated to be a man named Jose Miro Cardona. All of this was in part of that counter-revolution attempt by the CIA. So this book I think is really, really good. A good book. If anybody wants to read it, I'm going to go back to page 1. You can screenshot it for your records. Screenshot now if you want to remember to read this book. By Avrila Cringe. Take a good screenshot now. Okay. It's a good rack. It's got a lot in there to learn about this whole CIA plot, including against the literacy campaigns. And in Cuba, they talk about this being a CIA plot very openly. They're like, yeah, and it was the CIA. Like, yes. So let's talk about what actually happened to some of these teachers who were killed by the CIA-backed bandits. Basically, they called them banditos, who attempted to seek them out and murder them. So we have something here from Radio Encyclopedia, encyclopedia basically, right? And here's an article we have about one of the teachers who was murdered. So it says, just over a month before Conrado Benitez Garcia turned 19, he had already become the first martyr of the literacy campaign of January 5th, 1961. That day he was assassinated along with several local peasants by Osvaldo Ramirez's counter-revolutionary group in the Escambray Mountains Massif in central Cuba, the scene of terrorist attacks organized by the U.S. CIA. Those who knew him say he was quiet, shy, and introverted young man, but with a great desire to study and improve himself. The young man from Matanzas had a special vocation for teaching and joined in the early months of 1960 the contingent of volunteer teachers at the Pedagogical Training School in Minas de Frio in the Sierra Maestra. Following the call made by then Prime Minister Fidel Castro Ruz, he started as a Prime Minister, to spread knowledge among the people, he joined the literacy campaign on January 1st, 1961, just 2 years after the revolutionary triumph that had made his dreams of dignity and freedom come true. This also made it possible for him to enroll in secondary school in his hometown. Yeah. And they literally slaughtered teachers, but a lot of them were teenagers, yes. So it was not all teenagers, but yeah, a lot of teenagers. Amid his literacy work during the day, he taught more than 40 children, and in the evenings he taught as many adults who could neither read nor write. It was in the afternoon of January 4th, when he returned from his end-of-year holidays, that he was quick to bring his pupils the storybooks and sweets he had brought for them, despite the warning from one of the peasants about the presence of groups of rebels in the Escambray area. His eagerness to share with his disciples was strong, so he decided to continue on his way, hoping he would arrive before nightfall at the San Ambrosio farm, a place where he was teaching literacy. On the night of that day, he was surprised by a group of armed men who beat him, tied his hands behind his back, and kidnapped him before subjecting him to numerous tortures. On January 5th, after a mock trial, he was condemned and put to death for the crime of being a poor black teacher. Among the objects found beside his corpse were several books on composition, physiology, and arithmetic, as well as the gifts he was lovingly bringing to try to give to his pupils. So, they believed that his death would end one of the most beautiful works of the revolution. However, such a terrorist act did not intimidate anybody, but like a spark, it raised a wave of anger and patriotic revolutionary fervor, which immediately manifested itself in the readiness of thousands of young people to set out immediately for the plains and mountains of Cuba, organized in the Conrado Benitez Brigades, formed 12 days later in honor of the murdered teacher to carry out the literacy campaign. They murdered him for teaching people how to read. And this is the brutality of the United States government, of the CIA. When you really understand, if you understand one thing the CIA has done, if you understand one thing, and you're like, this one thing, let's choose this one thing. If you understand that the CIA tortured and slaughtered a 19-year-old because he was teaching children how to read in Cuba, and that would make capitalism look bad, you cannot believe a single thing the United States government tells you about any of our political enemies anymore. The brutality we are capable of is just astounding. It's just astounding. And again, it's important to note, they thought this one death would be symbolic. It wasn't. It made people want to push back harder. It made people want to fight back even harder. It's very, very, very sad, though. Fidel said on January 23rd of that year, did you hear the kitty? Ah, we got a raider. At the graduation ceremony of the second contingent of volunteer teachers, Conrado only knew honest sweat. He only knew poverty. Since the forces of the people, supported by their rights and reason, are 1,000 times superior to the forces of criminals and mercenaries, we will see how we will teach every illiterate person, and we will see how we will eliminate every last counter-revolutionary criminal. Right? So that's what's going on here. We see this just inspire the Cuban people even more. And more people coming to volunteer. More people from outside of Cuba coming to volunteer. Now, it's worth noting, what did they say his crime was? Being poor, black, and being a teacher. And remember this, when we get to Friday and we talk about the Cuban Americans, the Cuban American lobby, there is a race element to this. And the people in Cuba, after the revolution, they are true They are true Marxists, and that they will tell you it is the working class liberation first and foremost. However, the Americans are true white supremacists, right? Capitalism relies on driving that wedge. So remember that a lot of the people who stayed on the island who benefited the most from socialism were people who were black, darker skinned. We're the poor. And that's really the division we see. Yeah, I'll send this link to everybody right now. Hold on. Oh, and I'll drink some water. I feel my voice going too. Do you guys feel it or hear it? I feel it. I'll do tea. I'll do tea. Hold, please. Okay. Probably, and you guys heard it. Yeah. I'm dying. I'm dying. And I keep thinking it's going to turn into like, this is like gross, sorry. I'm always worried that when my allergies act up a lot, it's going to turn into a sinus infection, or when I'm sniffly a lot, it's going to turn into a sinus infection. But it hasn't yet, which is good, thank God. Clear snot only. We're manifesting continued clear snot vibes for me. Okay, so that's what we're hoping for. I think I'm just coming. Well, you guys saw the other day when the cat hair like fluttered in front of the camera, and I was like, what the fuck's going on? But the problem is also that she like loves my office, so it's like if I just touch anything, it's like everything is. I just picked this up. It's like right by my computer. I mean, it's like everywhere. It's cat hair. She's so cute. I want her to like me. You must eat the cat hair. Manifesting clear snot red blood for me. Yeah, the allergy shots. I know people have told me they're really expensive though, aren't they? Like hundreds of dollars, like every few months or something. Dying. I didn't take a Zyrtec this morning. I should have taken a Zyrtec. I need to start just taking one every single day. It's pretty bad. Okay, so $11. Oh my! I don't have health insurance right now. I need to figure that out. I need to get health insurance again. Oops. I'm gonna figure that out. Name brand allergy medicine is so expensive. What do you mean, Zyrtec? Oh, you missed this. Like a CVS went out of business near my partner's work, and everything was like dirt cheap, and my partner and all their coworkers were like going to like get everything while the CVS was out of business. And my partner was like, what do you want from CVS? And I was like, so much Zyrtec. So we got like I think it was like $5 for like huge things of Zyrtec. And I was like, you don't understand how fucking rich I feel right now. So we're like stacked with fucking Zyrtec right now. Yeah. It was pretty major. It was a real big come up for us. It's been months and I'm still riding that high because we still have it all. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Yeah. The dissolvable Claritin you can get at Costco, I will say. So, this is what happened. They're honoring this man. This is just one person, it's important to note, though, who was killed. Many teachers were killed. Another early person who died here is this man whose name is Manuel Asunce Dominic. And he became kind of famous because when bandits came to this home, they said, where is the teacher? Because they were trying to kill the teachers. And he knew that it would probably make him killed for being a teacher, but he stood up and he said, you know, I am the teacher. Yo soy el maestro. And he knew it would send him to his death, and he did it anyway. Right? Because he didn't want them to hurt the family that he was there. So he became... I know I need to get an air purifier. People keep saying that. He became kind of a famous martyr during this time. And this is him. I do have to... Oh, no, it's translated, yeah. It's very, very sad. So here this one says, this is a Cuban news station. U.S.-funded rebel bands in rural Cuba were characterized by their extreme cruelty. As they showed up November 26, 1961, they arrived at the hut of the peasant and militia member Pedro Lantigua in the Escambray Mountains, where the literacy teacher Manuel Asunce Dominic was doing his duty. According to witnesses, the assassins arrived in droves, shouting, "Oh my gosh, yeah, hi, welcome. Where's the rope?" in order to frighten those present. But Lantigua tried to protect the teacher, saying he was a relative, since the bandits insisted on finding the little communist teacher. Remember, these are anti-communist extermination campaigns as well, and that's important to remember. The number of communists that have been slaughtered by the U.S. government, it's just appalling. Millions and millions of communists slaughtered by the U.S. government. And, you know, it's just, liberals don't care about this shit. They don't care, right? Because they vilify communism too. They think the communists deserve to die too. However, even though the peasant attempted to defend him and said, no, he's just my relative, leave him alone, Asunce responded, "I am the teacher." It was enough for those beasts to take both the men away. Both the man and his student away, despite the pleading of the relatives. When their corpses were found the next day, they were shocked by the extent of the wounds, mutilations, and blows that the men suffered before being murdered. The criminals were bent on killing Manolito, as Asunce was affectionately known, after spending just 1 week in Lantigua's home. It was located in a dangerous area that was brimming with counter-revolutionary elements. But the young teacher had volunteered to be there in place of a female comrade because he didn't want her to be put up, in a risky position. Those who knew him held that he stood out for being a mature, dependable, and disciplined young man who shared everything he had with his friends or those in need of anything, and who reflected his early formation of the revolutionary values instilled in him by his parents. In 1960, Cuba astonished the world when Fidel Castro announced at the UN General Assembly a project to eradicate illiteracy in Cuba by 1961. And while the UN and even UNESCO sympathized with and supported the promising program, in the United States, the CIA set out to thwart the Cuban effort, calling it a sort of communist brainwashing plot. And they went beyond the smear campaigns to plot the murder of both the peasants who wanted to overcome ignorance and their teachers. By then, Yankee imperialism was backing hundreds of rebel bands, mainly in the Escambray region. Indeed, on January 5th, 1961, they chose as their first victim the teacher Conrado Benitez, who we just read about before. When they were captured, his own killers confessed that they promised him to spare his life if he would relinquish his ideals, to which Conrado replied, "I am a revolutionary, and I will not betray my people." He was savagely tortured and killed, along with the peasant Eliardo Rodriguez Linares. Far from deterring Cuban youth, the martyrdom of that 18-year-old young black man, to the frustration of his assassins and mentors from the North, inspired more than 100,000 people to join the brigade named after Conrado Benitez, which successfully brought the end to the literacy campaign in December of 1961. These were babies. These were children. And then you have liberals on the internet today going, "What do you mean you read political literature when you were 12? It was like, my guy, they were martyring 16-year-olds for their politics in Cuba under our presidency. How could you not? How could you not be inspired to it?" And that's no shade to anybody who didn't, anybody who came to it late, But that's the attitude we need to have, is that young people are capable, and they are targeted and treated like adults by the enemy anyway. So it is up to us to give them the tools, right, to have a good revolutionary political sense of consciousness. If they're being treated like adults by the enemy, we should give them the respect to know, they're not adults, they're adults in training, but to know they're capable of understanding and learning a great deal more than we give them credit for. So, on December 22nd, 1961, Fidel Castro announced that more than 700,000 Cubans learned to read and write, regardless of the obstacles posed by the United States and its internal agents, who failed in their attempt to prevent the triumph of the first historic campaign entrusted by the revolution to the youth, from which Conrado Benitez and Manuel, brothers in glory and martyrdom, emerged as symbols. Now, remember that picture from the literacy school of the martyrs, right? These are the first two on the list that we just read about. These, though, are all people who died just for trying to teach people how to read. Right? All of these people were killed in similar ways, horrific ways. I told you, hung by barbed wire, with their genitals cut off, tortured, mutilated, just for being teachers. And the CIA is so evil. The United States government is so evil, right? It's just horrific. So it's 12, but we're only 1/3 of the way through today's stuff, talking about the literacy campaigns. I also want to show you guys some a good section of things about elementary school, and then a little bit about college students. So I'm gonna keep going, just so everybody knows, but I might have to check my phone a little bit because I was like, one of my coworkers should be texting me now. She usually starts work around 1:30 and we have to coordinate. Oh, she's coming at 1. Hold on just a sec. And I have to do something for her to do her job. I'm like, yes, okay, got it. I think I'm good. So I might just have to do a little bit more. So the next thing I want to show you, that's just one thing. That just shows you out of the gate the Cuban commitment to education. The next thing we are going to talk about is elementary schools, children. And I'm going to show you a video that's a compilation of a lot of videos, basically, that we took when we got to tour an elementary school in that same complex. Remember, that whole complex had been part of the Batista military, and Castro was like, we're going to kick out the military, and we are going to turn this into a camp to teach our people. And that's exactly what they did. So this is a different building in that same camp that was an elementary school. And I'll show you some pictures, and then I'll show you the video, and we'll go through the video together. And some things to note, in particular, the children get their own children government, and they get represented as children in the government, which we talked about a little bit in their government section, and we're going to hear from some of those kids. There's an absolute diva who guides most of this process. You can tell just runs the school, by the way, this little girl. But let me take a look at some of these pictures to show you. So, here's where it is. On this complex, this was Batista's, like, palace. And they did exactly, when you talk to people in Cuba, you know they've read Marx, right? They're using words, they're like, oh yeah, so this was Batista's palace, so we just turned it into a palace for the people. And I'm like, oh, that's from like Marx and Engels. They say that. Turn these massive homes of the bourgeoisie, into palaces for the people. And they're like, yeah, so we just all have access to this now. This is just that. Which I think is cool. This is like kind of what it looked like. They put roads in, and then there's all these little buildings that all do different things. This is one that they weren't currently using at the time. This is what one of the classrooms looked like. And again, you can see they're not able to get things to do repairs. That's a major issue they have. It's not a particularly expensive looking place. Their ceiling tiles aren't in great shape, but honestly, I went to school in places in Fresno that looked pretty similar to that, So pretty nice. All the students get their own desks, and this looks very, very similar to what I grew up with. This is me in the school, the picture of Fidel. This is on the wall. They have a lot of really cute art on the wall. This is on the wall as well. These are Fidel Castro, Raul Castro, and the current president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, who was a teacher. They have this on the wall where they learn about their history, which is really, really cute. And they wear red and blue scarves. The red scarves symbolize the blood shed by the soldiers so they could have their revolution and get this education. The little kids, the smaller kids, the younger kids wear blue ones because they just thought it was a little morbid to put the young kids in the red, but the older kids wear the red, which is kind of funny. And then, they have just like some of these. This is apparently a cartoon that's really popular in Cuba. I don't know about this cartoon, but they were like, oh yeah, this is a cartoon. And this is the internal courtyard of the elementary school complex, which is really nice. And this is us standing in front of it. This is the school that we went to, the primary school, Pedro Domingo Murillo. We took a bus from the Martin Luther King Center where we stayed there. That's our interpreter. And this is just in general. Got a little Fidel on the wall. The 26th of July movement is there, right? And that's it. Okay, so now we're going to watch the video. And it's a video compilation of a lot of videos from the school, right? So it starts with this song. They welcomed us, and they were really, really excited to perform for us. And they performed a few songs for us. And this is important because later you'll see that one of the girls in this video, her job is that she's in charge of these kinds of things at the school. That's like her job, and she's one of the little girls, and she put it all together. So you'll see. Okay, so I don't know if you could tell, but I could tell right away. I was like, one of these little girls is like a diva. Like, she's a performer, and she actually is the little girl standing to the left of the woman speaking right now. So she would end up performing a bunch of poems for us. She was like the star performer. And to her left is the little girl who's in charge of coordinating all of that stuff and planning it and stuff. So now what we're going to hear from is a bunch of administrators at the school and the students at the school about generally how the school functions, how it runs, and also what rights the children have because of the children code, the family code, how their self-management kind of runs, and also the complications they run into because of the blockade. I think that's everything. Yeah, the white cardigan diva. She's a diva. I loved her.
Son los pioneros los que llevan a cabo la organización de la escuela, los representan, plantean sus inquietudes. Es decir, ellos son los que siempre están activos en esta organización.
For us, it's very important that these students are the ones having protagonism. They are the ones that should be represented in the school. They are the ones that should be carrying activities.
Son ellos quienes proponen a sus dirigentes.
And they propose to their leaders, but also they can talk about their concerns. To inquietudes, con la dirección de la escuela.
Exactamente.
I mean, they express their concerns with the professors that are leading the school as well.
Muy bien. Son ellos los que planifican las actividades.
They are the ones even who plan the activities they want to have.
Por lo tanto, es una organización muy importante en nuestra escuela.
So this is a very important organization for our schools.
Bueno, decirle que los pioneros de aquí en nuestra escuela son felices.
I just have to tell you that the students in our school are happy students.
Muchas gracias.
7 students made up by 7 students.
La jefa de actividades, Adriana.
So I started recording this in the middle of the response because I was like, oh, this is interesting. But they're asking, like, you said something about, like, a student government. How does that work? And so now the students are explaining how their student government work. And they're like, yeah, we have, like, 7 students for our school that represent us. And they're going to talk about it. And what you're going to hear is it's basically the exact same way that the government structure works everywhere. Remember when we talked about the government, we said they had the municipal level, the provincial level, and then the national level. That's kind of how their student government works too. Their children's government works. They have provincial representation. They have representation at their school, and then it goes up to the next biggest level, and they literally have like a whole little child government where they get their rights and they get to participate. Now, in Cuba, you get to participate in elections, direct elections in the big government when you're 16. So these would be for people under the age of 16, and it stems up from their schools. So when we also heard from the woman who is the head of the Young Communist League on Friday, we've seen a couple videos from her. She was wearing the Cuba t-shirt tucked into jeans. Her people sitting next to her were talking about how she was very high up in these kind of student government organizations when she was a kid as well. So a lot of people emerge as natural leaders from their school, and they end up in more and more and more leadership positions, government positions, or if not government positions, in the mass organization roles from there. So they see them as leaders from an early standpoint because, and you'll hear them talk about this, the little kids, because their peers trust them. And so when they talk about who they vote for and why, they're like, well, we trust this person to listen to us and to want done, to get done what we want, basically. And when we looked at that big triangle, I was like, this isn't a perfect representation, but I like that it shows the numbers. And you saw that there were 800,000 people in the regular government. 800,000 people. So like almost 1 in 10. Remember, there's 11 million people on the island. So we have almost 1 million people in their local government as well. Not just the mass organizations, but their government. Almost 10% of the whole country is in the government. So this idea that the Cuban people are not their government is frankly ridiculous. 1/10 of them is the government. It's just this massively high level of government participation. And Diaz-Canel started as, was a teacher. But yes, when we look at Diaz-Canel, I actually have some notes about him and his trajectory. You can see exactly what that looks like. Here, we'll talk about it. Hold on. Let me find in my little noties that I took. Where is he? Sorry, I have to flip through literal physical notes, so it's a little harder to find it. Where is he? Looking. Okay, here we go. So he started out as the first secretary of the Young Communist League of Villa Clara when he was young, and he had done stuff like this in school, and then he got his first big government job, which wasn't even in the government, it was in the party. So it wasn't even a government job, I guess. It was a party job. First secretary of the Young Communist League of Villa Clara. So that's a small level. Remember there's the municipal, the provincial, and the national. And then he became the first secretary of the provincial party committee of Villa Clara, and that was again in the party, not the government yet. So we went from the municipal up to the party, or provincial rather, in the party. And then he became, his first government job was as the Minister of Higher Education, because he'd been a teacher as well this whole time. And remember they said, you don't get paid for your government jobs in Cuba. You do your job, which he was a teacher, and then you do the stuff on top of it as well. 800,000 people are in their government structure alone. They have a massive government, and it's very, very participatory. And if you're not in the government, you can still be in the party and be involved. You can be in mass organizations. You can be in some of the mass organizations, like the Federation of Cuban Women, the Ministry of Culture. Those are just the ones that are in charge of the artists. If you just really love studying Jose Marti, who's considered their national hero, right? A literary figure who talked about Cuban liberation, who wrote a lot of more poetically, not theory-based things. You could be in the Ministry of Culture just to deal with Jose Marti, and that's a mass organization. You don't maybe necessarily need to be affiliated with the government or the party. That's just what you're into. So there's all these ways to be involved in society in this very structured level, and the mass orgs will not actually technically be in government jobs. They call them the bridges to the government from the masses. So you still get a role in the government and a say in the government from being in a mass org, even if you're not in a government specifically. And those 800,000 people, that was just the actual government structure alone. And the party, obviously, as I like to explain it, they're the living embodiment of a constitution. In socialist places, that's what the party usually does. It sets the ideology and the tone and the values for the country. But they don't have legislative power or government power. They are also a bridge to the government. So the government is here as the pillar. The party is a bridge to the government. And these mass orgs are a bridge to the government. And they all work together all the time, right? So that's kind of how it goes. And they're talking about the kids part of it right now.
The head of activities right here is Adriana.
Que junto a los jefes de destacamento y jefes de actividad de los destacamentos
And then together with the head of detachment of the students in the classrooms,
organizan las actividades que se realizarán a lo largo del mes.
they plan and organize the activities that are going to be carried out along that month.
Después esto se
Eso
lo,
digo con el que se reúnen al principio de
nos
mes.
reunimos a principios de
So
mes
we gather at the beginning of the month and we plan activities for that month.
con la guía base y la jefa de nuestro colectivo.
With the person that we say guía base, they gather with her and they tell her what they want to do during that month.
Y participamos en el consejo de dirección de nuestra escuela para decir lo que pensamos con los pensamientos que tienen los pioneros.
But we also go to the meetings of the director and the principal and vice principal of the school, and we pass on to them, we convey to them the ideas and thoughts that we, the students, have in that meeting with the principal.
She really is, like, you can tell she runs that school. She's like, knows everything going on. She's like, this. Like, in other times, people had to stop her from talking because the translator couldn't keep up with her. Adelso was like, hold on. And everyone was like, wait, you need to give the translator a chance to, like, translate what you're saying. And she's like, oh, fine. Like, she's so cool. But you can see her telling her, because she's not even in charge of the committee for the activities. She's involved in the student government, but she's not in charge of the activities committee they're talking about. You see her go to her friend and be like, hey, you should talk. Like, speak up, explain it. Yeah, did you just see her do that? I just loved that. And looking at her, I was really inspired because I'd seen the Young Communist League, the leader of that, the woman who was the leader of the Young Communist League. And I'm looking at this little girl and I'm like, this is how it starts. You're going to be in a leadership position in government. I could tell. And I could tell why your classmates trust you. And I could see you going to your classmate and being like, hey, get out there, like, say something. You should talk about it. Like, you just see it. You see leadership in these kids so early, and you see how it's fostered and encouraged, and it's just so cool. Isn't the Young Communist League transphobic? No. In Cuba? No. Cuba in 2019 formally enshrined LGBTQ rights in their constitution, and the party, the Young Communist League, and the party were part of the massive outreach and education campaigns, because originally when they polled people in Cuba about whether they would want to do this or not, a lot of, especially older people, were like, no, we don't want to do this. So the Communist Party and the Young Communist League were like, we need to educate people about queer rights, LGBTQ rights. And they set out on this massive education campaign all across the island to teach everybody about queer rights. And they did these classes and workshops and really tried to get, especially the older parts of the community, up to speed on gay rights. And when the actual vote came around, and these people got to vote from home computers on their phones on the changes to their constitution, which is so cool, they voted to, yes, enshrine LGBTQ protection. All of Cuba is very gay-friendly, one of the most gay-friendly places I've ever been to. And the Communist Party and the Young Communist League had a major part in getting that legally enshrined. Now, also I want to point out, the president, Miguel Diaz-Canel, has been campaigning for LGBTQ rights since the 90s as well in all of his government roles. So it is a very gay-friendly place, and the Young Communist League and the Communist Party in general are very, very pro-LGBTQ rights. Oh, you guys are talking about UK. Oh, okay, yeah, I know. This is all in Cuba. This is all in Cuba. Sorry.
Vice principal. Y le hacen caso. I'm asking if they listen to them.
Nos da preparaciones como para artes plásticas, artes musicales, cosas así. Danza.
We have a project and we get preparation regarding culture, visual arts, painting. They tell me that they have an art instructor in the school that is teaching the students all these things about art.
And you'll see art is taken very, very, very seriously by the Cuban people. It is considered a respected field, just like medicine, just like education, just like mathematics. Art is considered very important because part of what made Fidel Castro a communist was the writing of Jose Marti, who again was not necessarily a political theorist, but was a writer who thought national liberation was important. And so Jose Marti, not a Marxist-Leninist, but Fidel Castro loved reading Jose Marti's work, and it inspired him to look into liberation struggles. So to the Cuban people, art is a very important part of their revolution and their culture, and it is taken seriously just like any other subject in school. So they allocate a ton of resources to art training in school. We'll hear from this later, but we'll hear from college students talking about how their college system works. Important to remember when they're talking about how their college structure works, we'll get into that. Art is one of the subjects that this applies to as well. So if you go to art school in Cuba and you graduate, you are guaranteed a job by the Cuban government in art. And maybe you do things for the Cuban government. Maybe the Cuban government just pays you to make your own art, and that's considered an important part of their culture. And you do art exhibits and showings and that kind of thing. So that's, the kids are getting an early dose of that. The Federation for the Arts is considered very, very important. And on Friday, when I showed you guys last Friday in the stream, the 3 people sitting on the stage talking, 2 of the men, they were high up in one of the municipal Federation of Arts kind of things. And they set up this whole thing. So also along with this, the kneecap concert in Cuba that happened, where everybody was like, you were taking power from Cubans and they died off of ventilators, so you can do a concert instead. It's just, if you want any pinpoint example of the truth versus average Westerners' understanding of the world, this is a great example of that. First of all, that ventilator story was fake. Nobody died. Second of all, the way Cuba is set up, they have emergency power allocation going to hospitals at all times. So hospitals will only lose power for like a moment, and then the power will kick back on because they have a massive amount of emergency reserves specifically for hospitals, because that is their primary concern, and that has been dealt with and allocated, and those have not been gone through. And a lot of the solar energy also gets directed to hospitals. So hospitals, the hospital director we spoke to, she was like, we don't have to worry about that. We get priority from the government. Every hospital gets priority from the government for power. So we might lose power for a second, but it always comes back on immediately. So there's that. And so that story was fake. The hospitals get their own power source. The hospital power source is different than everybody else on the island's power source, is what I'm saying. And then third, that kneecap concert was not just a kneecap concert, and it was not just a concert for the Cuba convoy. So basically what happened is that the Federation of Arts in that municipality puts on a festival every season. That's just something they do, and it is a festival that has little vendors who make crafts. It's also, they have music, they have local rappers perform, local singers perform, they have a bunch of play areas for kids set up. They have book kind of events where people will talk about books and do book readings and things like that. They have film kind of screenings and things like that. So there's these festivals that happen every single season there in Cuba, and they're in this building, the structure that's permanent there, that's like an arts building, and it's the headquarters of the Arts Federation branch for that municipality. And they also are open just daily with less stuff going on, just like a cute little arts thing that the Federation for the Arts does there at the municipal level. So they allowed Kneecap to play 3 songs at the end of the regular concert. So that's what happened. So this was something the Cuban people do every single season. It was put on by the Federation for the Arts. And when they heard Kneecap was coming, they invited Kneecap to play 3 songs at the end of the set. So most of the concert was Cuban artists who perform regularly at that place. And it was a regularly scheduled event. And most of the audience was Cuban. And we got to go there because it's open to the public. And yeah, Kneecap was allowed to play 3 songs at the end of it. So that all is a great example. Oh, is Toby here? Yeah, we were looking for you the other day, Toby. Tony. Hi. Yeah. Anyway, I just thought that was a very interesting thing to hear from them and be there and then see how people were spinning it. I'm just like, oh my God, these people. Oh, terms of service, where is it? Toby, what'd you do? Commit eco here. Toby, I regretfully must, I don't know how to do it though. How do I fucking do it? I have to remove this, but I don't know how. Just for, I don't know how to do it, guys. I don't know if I can. Is Car here? Ugh, I can't do it. Okay, we're just gonna move past it. Communism is when no mods. I can't do it. And anytime you type, I can from my control on OBS, I can do people specific things, but not message specific things. You know? That's it's not letting me change a message. And Toby, it's just for terms of service, so we don't get in trouble. That's the only thing. But we're happy to have you here. Let me try. Okay, yeah, maybe you can. Thank you. Sorry. We're happy you're here though. And I'm sorry you lost your streak too. Yeah, who else wants to be a mod? I can add mods. Kubashi, would you want to be a mod? I can make you a mod. Maybe it would be. I'm not sure. Twitch is hard. Okay, we'll just move past it. We'll hope everything's okay. So Toby, you're here. We're talking about education in Cuba. So we're looking at these. Smash Ultra could be a mod. There's a lot of people who've been here from the beginning. And at the end, anybody who wants to be added to mod consideration, maybe, you know what? Maybe tomorrow. Hey, tomorrow we'll do an additional mod vote. Maybe that at the beginning. When Virgo's here, Virgo can run a poll for a backup mod and everybody can vote. How about that? Yeah, Lilith, you would be great too. Let's do that. Tomorrow morning, when we start the stream, anybody who wants to, we'll do a little vote for it. Okay? Yeah. I feel like there's a lot of people who... Yeah, mod nominations. Exactly. Yeah. And we'll do it like a proper Marxist thing, actually, where you can't nominate yourself. Other people have to nominate you. We'll do a Marxist election. That's how it works in Marxist-Leninism. That'll be cool. Okay, so let's get back into watching this video of the little kids talk about how their school works.
Y entonces eso nos da la posibilidad de conocer la música que teníamos en nuestros antiguos momentos.
Even we learn about the music we had in different epochs and moments.
Y nos da a conocer la forma de vivir que tenían nuestros ancestros.
Even we learn with that art teaching the way our ancestors used to live.
El código de la niñez.
We, the pioneros, have meetings in our detachments of classroom, but we also in Cuba have a code for infancy that is protecting us.
Pues en el código de la niñez.
Children's code.
Adolescencias y jóvenes, nosotros tenemos derechos, pero también tenemos deberes y nos protege. Ese es un código que nos ampara. También los pioneros podemos dar nuestras opiniones en las asambleas de destacamento.
So we have a code, we have this children's code that is protecting us, but we also have rights to fulfill within that code.
So they literally passed a children's code in Cuba just to protect the rights of children and to give them more power and say over their government and how they kind of live their life. Yeah, she's a yapper too. That's why I liked her. I was like, yapsies, yap. I love. And then they have certain rights within that children's code.
Okay, but in our meetings in the classroom, we express our feelings, our concerns.
También tenemos los congresos donde los pioneros participamos en los destacamentos y las escuelas. Se eligen los pioneros que participan en los congresos. Está el municipal. Del municipal se escogen los pioneros que participarán en el provincial y del provincial también se selecciona un grupo de pioneros que pasarán al nacional a expresar nuestras inquietudes, ideas que tenemos para mejorar nuestra organización.
In Cuba we have congresses for students. First, they carry out certain gatherings at school levels, for example in this area. Then they select who are going to be representing them at a higher level, that will be municipal level. Then they go to the provincial level and they are selecting students that will be representing all the students. From grassroots, it's like the people's power structure. And then from the national level, they even hold, or they have a national congress. ¿Y quién asiste a ese congreso nacional con ustedes?
No, asisten nuestros.
They literally have an entire children's government structure up to a national Congress level, which is so amazing. And that structure, that's what we talked about in the government structure, right? They get their local, and then they all elect somebody to represent them from their schools, and that goes to a municipal level little government structure. Then from the municipal level, they elect somebody, all the municipalities elect somebody to represent them at the provincial level. And then from that provincial structure, they all elect somebody to represent them at the national level. And then they get a national congress of a lot of people as well. So this is a standard Marxist-Leninist government structure, right? This is how it happens in the DPRK. I'm pretty sure this is how it happens in China, but I actually haven't looked into Chinese elections in particular, but it would make sense. This is how, if you are in a Marxist-Leninist party, this is probably how your party does things. This is a standard election model in Marxism. And every single person in the government is hand-selected by people who know them, is elected by people who know them. And then you choose delegates from your group that you trust can go represent you. And people can be recalled and switched out all the time. So when people from Western democracies, right, look at these structures and they go, well, why do you have people in charge for all these prolonged periods of time, right? These are dictators. They don't get a say, blah, 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 blah. It's very ironic because these are some of the most direct forms of democracy ever. Every single person in that government was elected by people who know them and trust them. It's an actual democracy. And when you have somebody representing you who you're like trusting to that degree, what you start realizing is that they're doing things for you, and continuity of leadership becomes very, very important. You don't want to switch out your representatives a lot of the times. If they're working, why would you, if it's good, why would you want to switch them out? They've got stuff in play, they're doing stuff, and you trust them. And you really do trust them. So Westerners can't imagine this because they can't imagine somebody actually liking their government or trusting their government because we hate ours so much. Because our government is there to oppress and harm us. These people's government is them. It literally is that. Like, this little girl is a part of their government. And that's not something I think the West can even fathom. Wait, can you guys not hear that? You can hear me. Let me try again. It should be working. You can hear me only. Okay, hold on. For some reason, the sound's not working for the capture. Let me see if I can redo it. Hold on.
That we see, they could really represent us, or they could really express what we want to express, and they could really represent us.
Y ahí hablamos hacemos
I'm going to go back a little bit because she's talking about how they choose who to elect, and I think it's really cute.
In the organization of the students.
Y ahí elegimos los pioneros que nosotros creemos o vemos que son los elegidos para dirigir o pensar mediante las opiniones que tenemos nosotros.
And then we select those students that we see they could really represent us, or they could really express what we want to express, and they could really represent us.
So again, this is like something that if you're in any organizing and you have to vote for people, this is the way you think. It's not like elections in the United States. It's not a beauty pageant, right? It's not a rich guy who has the most money, buys the most TV ads, and talks shit on everybody else. The way it usually works is that you can't even say yourself you want to run. Somebody else has to nominate you. And you vote for people based on who you think can actually represent your needs the most. And that's what she's saying. She's like, we choose who we think can actually take what we want and communicate it well to get the job done.
Ahí hablamos hacemos asambleas pioneriles y hablamos con los guías bases o con otras escuelas y solucionar las inquietudes que tenemos.
And then we talk with the base leaders, even from other schools, and we try to solve the problems we have together.
A ver, para responder la pregunta,
So to answer your question,
muy bien, muy bien. Nosotros acá estamos en el tercer perfeccionamiento de la educación,
we are in Cuba right now what we call the third improvement of the educational system in Cuba.
donde el elemento fundamental es el vínculo, familia, comunidad y la escuela.
So the fundamental element is the link between community, family, and the school.
Donde juega un papel fundamental todos los sectores, todas las entidades que están enmarcadas o en la demarcación del centro.
So there is a fundamental role for all the sectors and organizations that are around the school, in the area of the school.
Esto nos permite un trabajo desde la formación vocacional y orientación profesional
So women can work regarding their professional orientation
y la vinculación de los elementos comunitarios y los elementos de las empresas y entidades a la escuela.
and then community elements, enterprises that are in the area, all of them are linked to the school.
Que esto hace que tenga participación de todos los elementos dentro de la educación de nuestros hijos, de nuestros socios.
So all the elements in that area of community are participating in education of our children that are in our school.
Esto favorece el buen desarrollo de nuestros estudiantes y permite que el sistema educativo no esté enmarcado en lo idealista, sino en lo práctico, en lo objetivo, en lo que permite también, aparte de que el niño vaya viendo todo tipo de formación que puede tener en él una empresa, una entidad, una...
Llevan las empresas que están aquí. I mean, when, for example, there are factories, I don't know, scientific centers, places in the area. Children go to those places in order to get familiar with what is going on in their community. So it's not just like the formal system of banking education. They get involved with whatever is happening in their areas, in their communities. And that allows...
Okay, so remember when the George W. Bush era document was like, they send these kids to go do farm work? No. What happens is if your school is in an agrarian area, an agricultural area, in order for you to function and know best what your school needs and what will benefit people in your community, you go get familiar with the industry of your community. What's going on in your community? Okay, if we're agrarian, sorry, coughing. If we're like, a school that's surrounded by agriculture, if agriculture is what sustains us, why wouldn't your kids who have their own part of the government want to go figure out what they need, how to be prepared for that? How am I prepared to be a good member of my community if my community's primary focus is agriculture? And that's what they're saying. Maybe you are in an area where there's a huge factory or industry near you, or a huge company near you, or enterprise. They don't call them companies, enterprise, right? Of course you want to go figure out what's going on there. And you might go back to your school and you might be like, hey, we should really learn more about geology, or we should really learn more about whatever thing is being made at this nearby place that'll benefit us as a community, right? These are things that would be useful for you to learn, right? Yeah, middle and high schools do ag. I mean, what's the one? 4-H club, things like that. It's stuff like that. They just go, they learn about what's going on around them so that their education is comprehensive. So it's not just you sit in a room and you read a book. It's, what do we actually need to be able to participate in society? What is this education for, and what is it pushing? Right? We go visit firehouses, police stations. Yeah, it is, as Chinese Master said, it's wild how capitalism just demonizes the most normal things. The most normal things in the world, and capitalism is like, but they do it evil. They do it in an evil way.
For a better formation for the students.
También tenemos los proyectos educativos
We have some also the educational projects
que permite que padres, hermanos, familiares puedan también impartir una serie de preparación a los estudiantes sobre la profesión que tienen.
Viene de la escuela.
Sí.
But also we have this project, parents, big brothers, or not big brothers. I mean, members of the family can come to the school to talk about what they do to the students.
Eso sale a partir de los perfiles que nosotros podemos lograr en el diagnóstico de nuestros niños y a partir de acá podemos digregar, es decir, podemos separar para que nos permita que los niños también se formen y se preparen.
So according to the profile we carry out in the school, we know the characteristics of the students and we can then make selections of what we can use for a better preparation of the students.
Complica un poco los procesos que hacemos aquí en la escuela, ya que no los podemos desarrollar totalmente, aunque se intenta con el esfuerzo de nuestros profesores y trabajadores del
The
instituto.
blockade affects us a lot because we cannot fully carry out all the processes we want to have in the school. Even though we attempt to do things, we get complicated in some aspects.
La situación que atravesamos ahora mismo es un poco complicada y complica un poco la vida cotidiana en la casa, en la escuela, ya que algunas familias no tienen todo lo que se necesita, pero intentamos que los niños y los padres puedan tener lo que necesitan para la vida, para el aseo y la comida que necesitan también.
Right now we have been affected in our homes. We lack many things. We don't have, but we try only to cope with the basic things we have at home. For example, some toiletries, basic food, whatever we can get in our family. But we get affected for the lack of those things.
¿Y cuáles son los recursos que necesitan más las familias?
What are the resources families need the most? He's asking. ¿Qué recursos ustedes consideran que una familia necesita para Cuba?
Los recursos que necesitamos para sobrevivir es la comida, los aseos, ya que es una parte muy importante de la vida. Pues un niño aseado es culto. Entonces,
The thing that we need the most will be the food, but also toiletries. Because it's important to be clean, I mean, because when you are clean.
And again, when they talk about food, it's not like they don't have enough food to live, but it's just they don't have diverse foods. The foods you like, you might not get. Or you might get them once and then you won't get them for months. Like, it's very specific. And we talked about this, but I just want to reiterate. When they say they want food, it's not like they're starving. But the foods they have, it's just like, okay, cool, pork again, fish again. They have a lot of pork and fish, things like that, where they're like, they're living, it's fine. But the blockade being lifted would open them up to be able to import more foods and import foods year round, right? This is something that people don't think a lot about, but like, why do you have oranges year round where you live? Why do you have oranges in your grocery store when it's snowing outside for some of you in parts of the planet that you live in? Well, it's because you can import those. You can import those from other countries where it's not snowing, right? They can't do that. So they're stuck with fewer food options. So I just wanted to clarify. When they're like, well, food, obviously, it's, again, don't fall into that liberal trap of like the Cubans are all starving to death, because they're not. They just don't have the food diversity that I think any of us would like, right? So.
Get a boy, you gain culture.
Bueno, y también la base material de estudio que la tenemos completa. También ahora está.
Speaking of food, somebody saw it. Is it true that it's illegal to kill cows there? Gusano say that a lot. No, I had never heard this actually. So I can tell you when I was in Cuba, there was a lot of beef. People ate beef. There's more pork because the environment there is more suitable to raising pigs. But there was beef because I remember because I'm vegan. So there'd be certain things people would be like picadillo, and I'd be like, okay, picadillo, it's beef, right? And they'd be like, yeah, this is beef. You can't eat this. This is beef. So there's a lot of beef. And they even said in the video where we talked about the ASEAFs, the community centers where they fed the elderly and the disabled, they would say, what do you have to eat? Well, mostly it's pork and fish, but you get beef, chicken, rice, etc., etc. So no, it's not illegal to kill a cow. And my partner was like, oh yeah, I told my coworkers you were going to Cuba, and they were like, oh yeah, they shoot you there if you eat beef. I was like, what? This is a thing people think? And my partner was like, yes, this is a thing people think. And my partner told me that it's because when they made the switch to collectivized farms, they just regulated basically food sales. So you could have like a cow on your property if you wanted, but you couldn't like have a cow and then be slaughtering it and then selling the beef on the side, because that would violate the collectivized farming. So Comrade Thuggett says, I did see a cow roaming freely when I was in Cuba. Okay, all right. So I think that just because of their collectivized farming practices, you had to like register your animals and say like, yes, here are the animals I have. They are for personal use only. Otherwise, you'd have to be a farm and you would get collectivized. I think my partner was like, I'm pretty sure that's what these people have interpreted to mean this. But I didn't know because I had never heard that before. And I can assure you they have beef there and they eat beef. But pork is the most common.
En el tercer perfeccionamiento, como digo, y también lo tenemos un poco complicado, pero vamos avanzando.
Also, school materials, books, notebooks, pencils, certain things. But we have that a little bit complicated, but we are still marching on. She heard that we were talking about the children's code, okay, and she wants to know what happened after it was passed. It was part of the code of the families in Cuba, and she wants to know what happened after it was passed, how it is implemented in the school.
Jefa de enseñanza de primaria.
I'm the head of elementary level teaching in Cuba. Como
decía, el Código de la Familia fue concebido el 28 de enero del 2026.
As I said, the Code of the Families was aprobado. No concebido.
El Código de la Niñez, Adolescencia y Jóvenes.
It was passed as, the full name is Adolescents, Children's Code, something like that.
Yeah, cool.
Está concebido desde el objetivo número 7 de nuestro gobierno, de la institución gubernamental, que es planificar la vida, la constitución de la vida de nuestra familia desde la atención a los menores de 0 a 30 años, porque la niñez empieza de 0 a 6 años, de 6 a 12 la adolescencia y de 15 en adelante hasta los 30 es la juventud. ¿Ya?
Artículo 7 de la Constitución.
Objetivo 7 del gobierno, pero el artículo tiene
it's objective number 7, but it has 107 articles within the Cuban Constitution that support that decision of having that code. Okay, because and it is from 0, different levels. So infancy 0 to 6. Then we have adolescents, and then we have youth after 30 years old. Okay.
Y el objetivo fundamental es los deberes que tiene la familia.
And the main objective is to state the duties from the families towards that sector of the population.
Desde que nacen hasta su creación de la edad elevada, que es trabajar en la juventud de 15 a 30 años.
Since they are born until they are 30 years old when they start working and all that. Families have duties towards those.
Now, notice what they said. The youth is actually up to 35. They just kind of simplified it. They're saying 30, but it's 35. Notice what they said. Your rights up until you're 30 and you start working. Right? And that's because education goes so long. A lot of people are in college. Many people are in college until they're like 30. So you're considered young because your 20s is you learning things, and after you're done learning things, you often are on like basically a government assignment following college, and we'll talk about that, where they place you in in-demand areas, and that's your first job training. So that's kind of, we'll see that when we get to the college level, but a lot of people are doing job training activities basically after college, and it benefits two parts. So you get entry level work experience. That's your first job, right? You get on in the field learning experience, but also you are going to somewhere that's underserved by the Cuban government, a need. So it's a mutual relationship where, let's say you graduate from school as a doctor and you're like, okay, great, I'm a doctor. And the Cuban government will be like, hey, this really rural area out here, they need a doctor. They're short doctors. They don't have doctors. So we're assigning you there, and that will be your job training in this area. So you go and you help them there, and you get your job training, and you also serve that community. And so that's how they do it. So they basically, it benefits both parties. You learn, but you learn by helping in a place where they're short and they need more. Now, what's really, really fascinating when we get to the college section 2 is how they manage it's a centrally planned economy, right? How do they manage how many people are graduating into what jobs and what they need? And it's super, super cool how they do it. And I don't want to spoil it, so we'll get there. But just so she's talking about this, like, most people don't start working until they're around 30. Some people start younger if they don't go to college or whatever. But the reason their youth code goes up to your 30s is because a lot of your 20s you are expected to be learning still, engaged in the education system. So in the movie Bee, I have not seen Bees. But do you choose what field you want to work in, or does the government decide? We'll get to it. But basically both. You work together with the government to decide what field you want to work in.
Members of the family stopped me at the door of the dancing club or something that I can go to a hotel. I have sugar cane harvesting. I have the.
So in between this, there's a video I had to delete to make space on my phone, but it was of our main diva, Cardigan Diva, performing a poem. And she performed a poem for us. And the poem is called Tango, right? It's like, I have. And it's a poem about how after the revolution, all of these people who'd been oppressed under the Batista dictatorship suddenly realized they had these things that felt very basic to everybody else, but they'd never had. So our translator Adelso is now explaining what the poem is about. And one of the things we've talked about is how in Cuba they are very, very Marxist. We are all working class. We're in this together, right? But in the United States, we employ white supremacy as a tool to divide the people from each other. Racism is very, very, very real. It is a very huge part of our systemic structure here in the United States. Our ruling class relies on racism to keep us divided, to make it so that white working class people align themselves more with the power than with their immigrant neighbors, right? Or their black neighbors. So an element of the Batista dictatorship, the U.S.-backed dictatorship that had happened in Cuba, had been imposing those elements of racism there in Cuba. So Cuba, under the U.S. Batista dictatorship, had been very, very racist. And when you look now, you see with your eyes, a lot of the people who live in Cuba are black. They are darker skinned, right? And a lot of the Cuban Americans are not. They are not. You don't meet a lot of black Cuban Americans. I mean, you do. But, that's not a very visible Cuban American community. Why? Because they had been the people who were exploited, because the United States backed dictatorship. Batista had also those same elements of systemic structural racism. So part of the poem is talking about how black Cubans under Batista had not been allowed to go certain places. They couldn't go to hotels. They couldn't use certain things. They had a lot of racism there. So the poem talks about that. So that's what Adelso is explaining right now. So I had to delete the actual poem, and she was so good. She was great when she was performing it, and I felt really bad. But I thought, the explanation was very useful.
I have the soil. I can plant. There won't be any rural guard that will kick me out of my house. So that's the poem about. People gaining what they were supposed to be having all the time, but they didn't have before the revolution.
And now this is just the courtyard of the school, just a little pan around to see how it's laid out. Okay, and then we got to go into this classroom. I think these were first graders, if I remember correctly. And they were so cute. And there's a thing that absolutely kills me in this, where they were allowed to ask us questions. And the first question, this little boy in the middle of the frame with his hand up, he asks, how do you say the word world in English? And I'm like, this is like so Oh, Hummus Guzzler sent the poem. Thank you. Yes. Like, so indicative of the Cuban mindset. You're a first grader and you're already thinking internationally. You're already thinking about the world. And that's what you want to know. You get a bunch of people, English speakers in your class from another country, and your first question is, how do you say world? And that just, I was like, these are the values these kids are instilled with. This is the evil propaganda they're taught by the communists at an early young age, is to think about the world and their place in it.
Hablen sin pena.
Sí.
¿Qué sílaba aprendieron hoy?
Today we learn the syllable ga, go, gu.
Bueno, ¿quién le dice a ella una palabra con la sílaba ga? A ver.
Gallo. She said gallo means rooster.
Gallina.
Gallina, the hen. See? Gato, cat. This gato, hen. Pueden decir también ganamos la guerra. We shall be like Shay.
Okay, I didn't have the recording of the little boy saying it, I guess. But I filmed this at the end because there's a saying they say that rhymes in Spanish but doesn't rhyme in English. But she was just explaining why they wear the red the red scarf symbolized the blood of the soldiers who died for them to have their revolution, to have their right to learn these things that they didn't get to learn before. And the blue, they just wear blue. I think they said the red is just a little too macabre for the young kids to be wearing, right? But then she said this little saying, and I filmed way too late, right? But the translation is, for the revolution, we will be like Che. And it's just this thing they say to be like, we will be brave. Che fought for our revolution, and we will fight for our revolution the same way today. He told the child you can also say we won the war. Different ways to say it. That's funny. A better world is possible. Yeah, exactly. So that is... We're almost, there's a few seconds left. I think it's probably nothing, but let's just see. Okay, so that is the elementary school. Now, I know we're running late today, but again, I knew the Cuba content would cut into my normal work day, and I just kind of decided to go with it because it felt so important. Because for those of you who haven't seen it all, basically the people in Cuba said the most important thing we could do is go back and tell them the truth about Cuba, tell people the truth about Cuba, talk about Cuba. So I took that very, very seriously. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do, and I'm going to do it, right? And that's what's going to happen. So, we're running late today, and it is kind of my normal work schedule, but I kind of have just thought, all right, it's going to happen this week, and it's worth it. Now, there is one more section of this, but it's short, but it's about the college students, and we met with a lot of college students, and I have a short video of them talking. We'll talk a little bit about the college process because it's super, super fascinating, and that will be the last thing we talk about.
A ver, yo puedo hacer la historia desde el estudiante y después posgraduado.
I can tell you, the story when I was a student at the university and then when I was a graduate.
Acá en Cuba la universidad primero es gratuita.
First of all, in Cuba, to go to university is free.
Exacto. Para entrar a la universidad se exige hacer 3 pruebas de ingreso.
There are 3 entry tests for the university.
De cosas básicas, español, matemáticas,
Basic
historia.
subjects, math, Spanish and history.
Exacto. Superando esas pruebas, tienes la posibilidad de entrar a alguna de las carreras que existen en todo el país.
And then once you pass those entry tests, you have the possibility to go to school at the university in any part of the country.
Contrario a pensar de que no tendrías el dinero para pagarla, aquí solamente tu talento, tu preparación, tu intelecto es lo que impide que puedas llegar a la universidad.
So here it's not a matter of money. On the contrary, it depends on your talent, your interest, your effort in order to get to the university.
Entonces, después de pasar ese proceso, cuando estás en la universidad,
And after that process, once you are in the university school,
¿cómo se dice? Ajá, se iba a hablar. El Ministerio de Educación te da un estipendio, un dinero.
and then the Ministry of Education will give you an stipend.
Que va ascendiendo según pasan los años, aunque hay que reconocer que en ninguna de las épocas ha sido suficiente.
Now, we need to acknowledge that stipend, even though you get a little bit of more of money every year, we need to acknowledge that it's not enough due to the conditions we're living in.
Pero realmente.
And so I just want to really recap what he's saying. So this guy was a college student, but he was also a teacher. So he was at the point, I think I think he'd graduated from college and was now doing like his teaching kind of thing. So he was a recent college graduate, if I'm remembering correctly. He was cool. He also could sing. He sang for us, and it was like beautiful. And he was volunteering at the farm at the same time that we were, and he volunteered, and he was in my same little volunteer group, so we were like planning things together. He was cool. But basically what he's saying is this, like, you graduate from high school, if you want to go to college, it's totally free. The only rules are you have to pass 3 tests, which are really basic. It's like reading, mathematics, and whatever the third thing he said was. Yeah, student teacher, I think that's what he is. So you pass these 3 tests, and if you pass them, then cool, you can go to college. And if you don't pass them, you can just take them again as many times as you want until you pass them, basically. Keep studying, whatever. So once you get accepted into college, you don't have to work a job. You get a stipend. It's not a lot of money. It's not as much money as you would get working a job. It's like a little bit of money, but it's a stipend to live off of from the government. So a lot of college students, they live with their families still, but you can go to college anywhere you want in the country. So if you want to move to Havana and go to college, you can move to Havana and go to college, and you don't have to live with your family, and they have student housing and stuff like that there. So that's what he's talking about. So when they say stipend, it's stipend, and it's you get a little bit of money in lieu of a salary for working a job from the government to go to school. So not only do you not pay to go to school, the government pays you to go to school. And that's pretty common, I know, in a lot of even other capitalist countries like Europe. A lot of countries in Europe will have that, but that's the system they have here. But when we get into how they get placed for what they go to school to, it's going to be really, really interesting. So we'll keep watching. Do you have to be accepted? You just have to pass those 3 tests to be accepted into college. And then you can go to whatever college you want to across the country. But the colleges are based on different types of education, different fields you'll study. And how you determine what field you study is the most interesting part. But I'll wait for him to introduce it, and then we'll talk about it. It's so cool. Yes, the third test is history. That's what I thought. Yes. So, and that's what I mean, where like the average person here knows so much about like history, about politics, about everything, geopolitics. I mean, it's absolutely wild.
Es un incentivo para aquel estudiante que quiera llegar a la universidad.
But it's an incentive for you as a student if you want to attend university and to be having a higher level of instruction and education.
En ese sentido, cuando ya estás en la universidad existen muchas oportunidades porque hay quien llega a la universidad no entrando a la carrera que soñó llegar.
And then, in this sense, you have many possibilities because sometimes, I can explicarle, when you want to enter the university, they give you a form with 10 choices. Okay? You have the possibility, you say, for example, math, English, history, you have 10 choices. But there are different posts in different schools. And depending on the needs of the country, they offer those posts. So maybe because of the results in your test, you couldn't get what you wanted to study. You got the second or the third choice.
Okay, so just to clarify, this is how the centrally planned economy places you as a college student in a field. So you take your general ed test, English, math, history, whatever. And you get a score, pops out a score, right? And then you get a form. What subjects are you interested in studying? There are 10 potential choices, and you can mark as many of them as you want, okay? And let's say you choose 3 subjects. Let's say you're like, I want art, I want medicine, and I want history. Now, let's say they look at your scores and they're like, holy cow, you scored super, super high on all of these. So your first choice for whatever you want, art, medicine, and history. They might look and say, you know what, we need more historians right now. So, history would be the best thing for you to go into, but you scored so high you could go wherever you want, basically. They might have something like that happens. Or they might look at you and you'd be like, okay, you passed your entry exams. You did not do great though. You barely passed your entry exams. They might look and they might be like, doctors? No way you're going to be a doctor. Because we only have 5 available spots for doctors, and we're saving those for the people who perform super, super well. Because everybody wants to be a doctor right now. There's huge demand. Everybody wants to be a doctor. We only have 5 available spots, so we're taking the top 5 people. But you know what? Not many people want to be a historian right now. We need a bunch of historians, and hardly anybody wants to be a historian. And you passed, so we're going to send you to history. That's because we need more historians. So that's how it goes. So this system literally is like a combination of what you want and what we need. And if what they need, there's not a lot, they don't need a lot, they're only going to take the best of the best to fulfill those areas. But if there's a bigger need, guess what? The requirements are going to be a little easier, right? The requirements are going to be a little bit easier. We just need this. So we don't have the luxury of being picky. We need a bunch of people in agriculture right now. If you studied ag, or if you want to study ag, and we have a huge need for agriculture, okay, we're not going to be sticklers about it. Maybe your test scores weren't the best. Who cares? We have a need. Send you there. It is very, very cool, though, I think, because they're only going to send you to categories you expressed an interest in, that you said you wanted to do. But if it's an area, so the thing that's cool that I think about this is, think about this. We were all told that tech was going to be so huge, and then everyone should go to school to write code, right? That's what you should go to school to. Write code, write code, write code. That's what you should go to school for if you want a job, And then now look, AI is writing a bunch of code. Badly, but it's doing it. So there's not a lot of jobs in code. So you have a lot of people who are highly educated in writing code and they can't find jobs, right? So you have this mismatch of talent and of need in society. And this structure helps place you where you are as a talent resource for the country into the field that the country needs. And they also take into account what you want, because if they just plop you wherever, you're not going to want to do it. You're not going to be performing super well. It has to be something you're interested in at the end of the day, right? So that's kind of how they choose what fields you're going to go into. It's based on how well you perform. And guess what? If you perform at the top of the top, you get your choice of what you want to do, because you're the top of the top, baby. If your scores aren't so great, come on. You got to work with us a little bit here. Come on, right? Yeah, we are living in anarchy. There's just chaos and no planning at all. Exactly. We have all these smart people. They're not ending up in the places that are the best suited to them. I love this process. Oh, thank you for the gifted sub. Yay. I love this process because I was a school person. I did very, very, very well in school. I just wanted a job, right? I didn't know what degree was going to get me a job. There were things I was interested in. I was interested in writing. I was interested in history. I was interested in making clothes. Out of those 3, I was like, I know making clothes is a job. That's a tangible thing. That'll probably get me a job. So I'm going to choose that one. I don't know if that was the smartest thing for me to have done. I don't know. It's hard. It's actually really fucking hard to get a job in making clothes too. So to have something like this where I'm like, here are all the things I would do. Where can I actually work? Where can I be useful? Where can I be good? What do we need? That kind of stuff is really, really important and very, very cool. Also worth noting, art is one of the categories you can choose. You can choose to be an artist, and just like any other category, you can be placed in art, and all of these categories, you are guaranteed a job after college. You are sent on a job, and they're going to talk about more of that, okay?
Exacto, exacto.
And there are 3 calls.
Aquellas personas que tienen esas 10 opciones tienen 3 convocatorias.
Those who have those 10 choices, they have 3 calls.
De las 3 pruebas de ingreso a la universidad, suspendes una, entras en la segunda convocatoria.
I mean, if you don't pass the first entry test, you can get into the second call.
Si suspendes 2, en la tercera.
If you fail 2 tests, then you got the third call.
So what they're talking about with the entry test is if the requirements for those passing those 3 entry tests, basically it's 3 and 3, which sounds confusing, but they're different things. You take your general ed entry test, basically. Different fields have different requirements based on what they need. So doctors, let's say, you are super in demand as a doctor. We need doctors, right? It might be easier to pass the doctor exam. They might have lower requirements. But from those same tests, getting into math, if they have a ton of math teachers, they don't really need more math teachers, the requirements might be higher, but from those same entry exams. So, you take your test and it's like, did you score high enough to be a mathematician? No, you didn't. But you did score high enough to be a doctor because we need more doctors right now. So that's what she's explaining.
Y para los que no,
igual de cambio de carrera. Eso es lo que yo sé.
Sí, bueno, digo.
No, yo decía que, por ejemplo,
for example, you couldn't get your first choice.
Exacto, sigue siendo el talento, el estudio, el esfuerzo de la persona.
But then it will be the talent, the effort of the person, the one that will call the shots here.
Decidí cambiarse.
To decide to change, you couldn't get your first choice, but you go to the second. But you say, in second year, after first year, I want to go back to my course. And depending on your talent, on your marks, you can apply for that.
Y en ese sentido, cuando ya...
So let's say you don't pass high enough to get your first choice. If you go to school for your second choice, and after a year or 2, you can apply to be considered for your first choice again. Maybe you're doing really, really well in school. Maybe your grades are super, super high. Maybe you're really dedicated. And you're like, look, no, I will really dedicate myself to this field. You can apply again, is what they're saying.
Terminas la universidad, lo único que te pide, que te exige, en este caso el ministerio que te formó, la universidad que te formó, es que hagas servicio social de egresado.
The only thing they are demanding from the people who they are graduating from the university. I know that the term social service has a different connotation for you in the United States. But here it means that you need to, like a payback, where the country needs you to be. They need historians in a province. Okay, they stay there for 1 year, 2 or 3. That's the way they do it.
Y es pagado.
And they pay you salary for that.
Ya tiene salario.
Okay, you're working. I think it's fair. You study for 4, 3, 5 years, and they tell you we need English teachers in the end of June, where is that they're from, and then you go there. I went there myself when I was graduating.
So that's what they're saying. They call it social service. It's something different here, but there they call it social service. And it means when you graduate, now you go do your social service. Your 2 years or whatever, 1 to 2 years of job placement. So it's the equivalent of training. That's your entry level training for the job, but also you're working in a place where they need you. So they, basically go around and send you. And Adelso's like, I did this. I got a degree in English, and they were like, we need English teachers here. So then I went and I did, my social service there teaching English. And he's like, I think it's fair. It's fine.
You study. You are studying, let's say, accounting. And they need accountants in a sugar mill factory in a place. They said, I want you to be there for 1 or 2 years. That's the only way. That's the only thing you have to pay. Okay? No more time.
So we have to go. We have a number of situations, good, bad, right? And it's kind of...
This comment from Trash. In America, we don't have that. You just pay $100,000 for a degree and then become homeless. It's so real. No. You just pay tens of thousands of dollars for something totally useless, and then you become an Uber Eats driver.
hard to give you a simple answer because it's a complicated situation, right? So I
Now, this is Damien, and he's talking about the effects of the blockade on college students, and it's really interesting.
say that between the lack of energy, the lack of connectivity, the lack of transportation, it's very hard. Uh, Specifically when we talk with about people that live in outside the country, right? They spend most hard time to get to the university and other schools in the city, right? But essentially, this is an obstacle for the education, for the development of knowledge of young people. That's essentially.
In this moment, our university don't have presential class. We are in the school, but not assist to the university. The university have to medir, ¿cómo se dice? Measure to not assist to the university because the transportation is very expensive. It's very escasa. Entonces, we are in the local area, in the school in the local area, and work on that and service.
The alternative is online courses.
Yeah,
right?
because it's
That's
difficult too.
what-
Because the connection is bad in here. It's very bad. You notice, and it's very expensive.
So what they're talking about is the effects of the blockade, and what they're saying is, well, because now we don't have fuel, people literally can't like power up their cars to drive to class. So then we're trying to get creative, and we're like, okay, so we send teachers to areas outside of the city where there's a lot of students in the suburbs, and the teacher will come to you. So instead of 10 people having to put gas in their car to drive to the city, they'll have one teacher put gas in their car and drive to the suburbs to teach the kids. And that's how they're trying to deal with the effects of the blockade temporarily, since they don't have oil access. The other thing they're saying is, okay, we can do online classes, and that saves fuel, but when the power goes out, the internet goes out. So then you don't have internet, so that's not reliable either. So this is the kind of stuff we're talking about. We're talking about the effects of the blockade making their lives harder, and it's senseless and cruel. It's not people are starving to death and cannibalizing each other in the streets and everything's on fire. It's shit like, I can't get to school. And that stuff is important. It is very, very important. But again, just to go against that liberal narrative, that socialism is murdering people and the United States government's kindness is the only benevolent factor keeping them alive. No, not true. However, not allowing them to import oil does have real tangible effects on their life that is making their lives harder than it needs to be. So, there we go. The blockade is fucking annoying. It is annoying to these people. It is a constant thing for them that they have to think about and work around. But like that one doctor said that we talked to, she's like, the blockade is our teacher, and it's a really horrible, annoying teacher, and we hate it, but it makes us better at things because we are always figuring out ways to deal with the situation, new things to think about. So that is all I have for you today. We ran so late. I'm so sorry. But I think it's important because education, you can clearly see, is a very, very important part of the Cuban people's lives, of Cuban society. I personally find it so inspiring. I have a lot of FOMO because the Cuban method of dealing with college, I'm like, I'm so jealous of that. That would have been so good. And when they talk about the person who was like, oh, we just have no systems here. Holy shit, we just have like anarchy. Yes, capitalism is anarchy. The free market is anarchy. It is inefficient. It is bizarre. It is ridiculous. And the idea that this would somehow be the best system on earth is so silly when you hear people doing things like that and you're like, oh, that makes sense. Why wouldn't we just do that? Like, God forbid we do something that just fucking makes sense, right? It's like, oh yeah, why wouldn't you just have people go to school for the things you need and then place them where you need jobs? Okay. So, all right, I'm gonna get out of here. I gotta go to work. I gotta get things going for my coworker. We're gonna raid Larry, obviously. What would I have studied in Cuba? If I didn't have to think about getting a job and I was just allowed to study whatever, I think I probably would have studied history. I think I would have wanted to be a history teacher, maybe. Yeah. Something like that, or a journalist, a writer, some sort of writing. Yeah, I think that's what I would have done. And I did write. I do have the book. But then they gave me the money for the book and I just gave it all away. Sure, I don't have that money anymore. Okay, so get ready to read Larry, chat. I'm so happy you guys have been here on this Cuba journey with me. Are we Cuba pilled? I'm Cuba pilled. You're excited for your order for tunnels? Yay, we're shipping orders today. That's what we're getting ready to deal with all the shipping. I'm Cuba pilled. Money for the book. Yeah. Wrote a book, got money, gave it all away. Have no money. I'd love to write another book. We'll see. We'll see if anybody would buy another book for me. All right. Bye, everybody. Go read Larry. Learn some things about Juche. This is always the part where I see how many people we lost. How many people stuck around. How many people are showing up for Larry. It's kind of low today. I wasn't on my game. All right. Okay. Bye.